She was invisible until someone sent her roses. 12 blood-red blooms with a card that read, "For the girl this house pretends not to see." Emily Hart had spent 3 years as a shadow in Adrian DeLuca's mansion, a maid no one noticed. But when the Mafia kingpin found those roses, everything shattered. His jealousy wasn't romantic, it was territorial. Someone had breached his fortress. Someone knew her name. And buried in Emily's past was a secret that could topple empires. A flash drive that exposed the most dangerous crime lord in the country. The roses weren't a gift. They were a death sentence. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story reaches. Emily Hart had perfected the mathematics of invisibility. 3 steps behind, eyes down, breath shallow, moved through the DeLuca estate like water through marble. Present but unnoticed, essential but easily forgotten. For 3 years, she had cleaned the blood from Adrian DeLuca's world without ever acknowledging its existence. She polished mirrors that reflected an empire built on fear. She arranged flowers in vases worth more than her annual salary. She changed sheets that whispered secrets in expensive thread counts. And she was invisible. Not because she lacked beauty. Her honey blonde hair caught afternoon light in ways that could stop conversations, and her gray eyes held depths that suggested stories untold. But Emily had learned early that beauty without power was just another liability in a world where men like Adrian DeLuca decided who mattered. So she erased herself, became background noise and a ghost in staff uniform, until the roses arrived. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when Emily found them outside the service entrance. 12 blood-red roses arranged in crystal that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The card was small, cream-colored, expensive. The handwriting was masculine, confident, unfamiliar. For the girl this house pretends not to see. Emily's hands trembled as she read those words. Someone had noticed her. Someone had watched her closely enough to understand the careful choreography of her invisibility. Someone knew her name. The card wasn't signed. Her first instinct was to throw them away, to dispose of the evidence before anyone discovered them. But something stopped her. A flicker of rebellion she thought she'd extinguished years ago, back when she still believed she deserved to be seen. She carried them to her small room in the staff quarters, a converted storage space with a window overlooking the estate's eastern gardens. The roses looked impossibly vibrant against the room's utilitarian gray walls, like a wound blooming in monochrome. Emily touched one velvet petal, and for just a moment, she let herself imagine a different life. One where mysterious bouquets were romantic instead of terrifying. One where being noticed didn't feel like being hunted. The moment shattered when her door opened without warning. Adrian DeLuca filled the doorway like a storm front. 6 feet 3 inches of controlled violence wrapped in a $15,000 suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes the color of espresso and just as bitter. Emily had seen him exactly 4 times in 3 years. Twice in passing through hallways. Once during a staff meeting he'd attended for reasons no one understood. And once, memorably, covered in someone else's blood after what the household pretended was a business dinner. He never looked at the help, never acknowledged their existence beyond the services they provided. But now he was looking at her, really looking, and his eyes had found the roses. Where did these come from? His voice was low, dangerous, the kind of quiet that preceded screaming. "I don't know, sir." Emily kept her gaze down, her hands clasped, her posture submissive. 3 years of practice made the performance flawless. They were outside the service entrance this morning. "Show me the card." It wasn't a request. Emily retrieved it with trembling fingers, hating how her body betrayed her fear. Adrian took the card without touching her hand, studied it with the intensity he probably applied to execution orders. His jaw tightened, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger exactly, but something more complex, more personal. "Someone sent you roses," he said softly. "Someone who knows this house well enough to access the service entrance. Someone who's been watching you." "I don't know who. I don't care what you know." Adrian's interruption was surgical. "I care that someone breached my security to deliver a message to a woman in my household. Do you understand what that means, Emily?" The sound of her name in his mouth sent electricity down her spine. He knew her name. She'd assumed she was just another faceless member of staff, cataloged by function rather than identity. "No, sir," she whispered. "It means someone is testing me. Someone wants to see how close they can get to what's mine." What's mine? The possessiveness in those words should have terrified her. Instead, it ignited something dangerous and long dormant in her chest. "I'm just a maid," Emily said carefully. "I'm nobody." Adrian moved closer, and Emily forced herself not to retreat. He smelled like expensive cologne and gunpowder, a combination that probably should have been contradictory, but somehow suited him perfectly. "You're somebody to whoever sent these," he said, "which makes you somebody to me. Pack your things." Emily's head snapped up, breaking 3 years of carefully cultivated deference. "What?" "You're being moved. Guest suite on the 3rd floor. I'm doubling security on this wing until we identify who's playing games." "Mr. DeLuca, that's not necessary." "I'll decide what's necessary." The steel in his voice could have cut diamonds. "You'll be moved by tonight. Antonio will escort you to your new quarters. You don't leave the estate without my personal approval. You don't speak to anyone outside the household. You don't accept any deliveries, gifts, or communications from unknown sources. Are we clear?" Emily's mind raced. A guest suite. On the 3rd floor. Those rooms were for visiting dignitaries, business partners, people who mattered. "Sir, I don't understand why—" "Someone is using you to send me a message," Adrian interrupted, and for the first time she heard something other than command in his voice, something almost like concern. "Until I know what that message is and who's sending it, you're under my protection, whether you want it or not." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "And Emily? Don't mistake protection for kindness. This isn't about you. It's about control. Someone dared to reach inside my walls. I'm going to find out who, and I'm going to make them regret it." The door closed with a quiet click that felt louder than any slam. Emily sank onto her narrow bed, staring at the roses that had just demolished her carefully constructed invisibility. She'd spent 3 years avoiding Adrian DeLuca's attention. Now she had it in full measure. And she had a terrible suspicion that her life would never be simple again. What? 6 hours later. The guest suite was obscene in its luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens, a king-size bed with sheets that felt like water, a bathroom with heated floors, and a shower that could accommodate 4 people. Artwork that Emily recognized from her art history courses. Originals, not prints, casually displayed like posters in a college dorm. Antonio, Adrian's head of security, had escorted her personally. The man moved like a tank wrapped in Armani, all muscle and menace with dead eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "Don't leave this floor without notifying me first," he'd said in heavily accented English. "Don't open the door for anyone except Mr. DeLuca or myself. Don't approach the windows after dark. There are cameras in the hallway, but not inside your room. Your privacy is maintained, but your safety is monitored. Understood?" Emily had nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. Now, alone in a room worth more than everything she'd owned in her entire life, she felt the weight of her situation settling like concrete. Someone had sent her roses. Someone knew she existed. Someone was using her as a pawn in a game she didn't understand. And Adrian DeLuca, a man whose name made seasoned criminals reconsider their life choices, had just declared her under his protection. Emily moved to the window, careful to stay back from the glass as Antonio had instructed. The gardens below were beautiful in the fading autumn light, all carefully controlled nature and hidden security measures. Everything in Adrian's world was like that, she realized. Beautiful surfaces concealing dangerous depths. She wondered which category she fell into now. Surface or depth? Beautiful or dangerous? Or both? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, assuming it was Antonio with additional instructions. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, carrying a garment bag and shoebox. "Miss Hart," the woman said with a slight Italian accent. "I'm Sophia, Mr. DeLuca's personal shopper. He asked me to provide you with appropriate clothing for your new accommodations." "That's not necessary." Mr. DeLuca was very specific. Sophia's smile was kind but firm. He said, and I quote, "She's under my protection now. She should look like it." The garment bag contained designer clothes Emily recognized from magazine spreads she'd studied during rare breaks. Dresses, slacks, blouses, all in her exact size, all in colors that would complement her complexion perfectly. How did he know my measurements? Emily asked, then immediately regretted the question. Sophia's smile turned knowing. Mr. DeLuca is very observant, even when we think he's not paying attention, especially then. After Sophia left, Emily stood in her new closet, a walk-in space larger than her previous room, surrounded by clothes she'd never be able to afford, in a suite she had no business occupying, under the protection of a man she'd spent 3 years avoiding. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Welcome to your gilded cage, Emily. How does it feel to finally be seen?" Her blood turned to ice. Before she could process, before she could breathe, a second message appeared. The roses were just the beginning. Tomorrow, you'll understand why you were really invisible all along. Sweet dreams in your beautiful prison. Emily's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. She should tell Antonio. She should show Adrian. She should... A third message. P.S. Don't bother showing this to your new protector. I'll be long gone before he can trace it. But I'll be watching, always watching, just like I've been watching for 3 years. The phone went dead in her hands. When she tried to restart it, the screen remained black. Whoever had sent the messages had killed the device remotely, eliminating evidence with professional efficiency. Emily sank onto the bed, her mind spiraling through implications she didn't want to consider. Someone had been watching her for 3 years. The entire time she'd thought herself invisible, someone had been paying very close attention. Someone who could breach security, deliver roses, send untraceable messages, and disable her phone remotely. Someone who knew exactly how to make her feel hunted. A sharp knock made her jump. "Miss Hart!" Antonio's voice through the door. "Mr. DeLuca requests your presence in his study. Now." Emily's pulse hammered. Had he somehow discovered the messages already? Did his security extend to monitoring her phone remotely? She smoothed her hair, tried to calm her breathing, and opened the door. Antonio's expression was unreadable. "Follow me." They walked through hallways Emily had only ever cleaned, past artwork she'd dusted without really seeing, down corridors that suddenly felt less like a house and more like a fortress. Antonio stopped outside massive wooden doors. "He's expecting you. Go in." The study was exactly what Emily expected from Adrian DeLuca. Dark wood, leather furniture, shelves lined with first editions that probably cost more than cars. A fireplace large enough to stand in. Windows with bulletproof glass disguised as regular panes. And Adrian standing by those windows, silhouetted against the dying light. "Close the door," he said, without turning. Emily obeyed, her heart in her throat. "We have a problem." Adrian's voice was controlled, but Emily heard the edge beneath it. 3 hours ago, someone hacked my security system. They didn't take anything, didn't damage anything. They just wanted to prove they could access it. He turned to face her, and Emily saw something in his expression she'd never expected to see on Adrian DeLuca's face. Uncertainty. "This isn't about territory or business," he continued. "This is personal. Someone is targeting you specifically, using you to send me a message. The question is why." Emily swallowed hard. "I'm nobody, Mr. DeLuca. I don't know why anyone would..." "Stop." One word, absolute in its authority. "Stop pretending to be nobody. Someone thinks you're worth this level of effort. That makes you somebody very important, whether you admit it or not." He moved closer, and Emily fought every instinct that screamed at her to retreat. "I'm going to ask you a question," Adrian said softly, "and I need you to be very honest with me. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Why did you take this job 3 years ago?" The question hit like a physical blow. Emily's mind raced through possible answers, through carefully constructed cover stories she'd prepared and never needed to use. "I needed work," she said carefully. "The agency placed me..." "The agency was paid very well to place you here specifically. I know this because I pay for detailed background checks on all household staff, and yours came back clean. Too clean. So I'll ask again. Why did you take this job?" Emily's world tilted. He knew. Somehow, he knew. "I was running," she whispered, the truth escaping before she could stop it. "From my past. From someone." I thought if I could disappear, become invisible, I'd be safe. Safe from who? I don't know. Another truth, bitter on her tongue. My former employer vanished 3 years ago. One day he was there, the next he was gone. His office was cleaned out overnight, no forwarding address, no explanation, just gone. Adrian's eyes sharpened. What was his name? Michael Chen. He ran an import-export business in San Francisco. I was his executive assistant. What kind of imports and exports? Emily hesitated. This was the line. Once she crossed it, there was no going back to invisibility, no retreating into shadows. I didn't ask questions, she said finally. I processed paperwork, managed schedules, organized files. But sometimes I saw things, heard things. And one day I realized the legitimate business was just a front. For what? Money laundering, maybe more. I never had proof, just suspicions. But Michael was scared of someone. I saw it in the way he jumped at shadows, the way he checked over his shoulder constantly. The last week I saw him, he was terrified. Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he disappeared, did he leave anything behind? Files, documents, anything someone might want badly enough to track you for 3 years? Emily's blood ran cold. The flash drive. She'd almost forgotten about the flash drive. Miss Hart, Adrian's voice cut through her panic. I asked you a question. There was a USB drive, Emily heard herself say. The day before he disappeared, Michael gave it to me. Said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe. Don't look at it, don't copy it, just keep it hidden. So I did. Where is it now? Emily met his eyes, saw the intensity there, and made a decision that would change everything. In a safety deposit box in San Francisco, under a false name. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush diamonds. Finally, Adrian spoke. Emily Hart probably isn't your real name, is it? No, sir. And you've been hiding in my house for 3 years, invisible by design, hoping whoever scared Michael Chen wouldn't find you. Yes, sir. Until someone sent you roses and decided to make you very, very visible. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. Adrian moved to his desk, poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter, and offered her one. She took it with shaking hands. Here's what's going to happen, Adrian said, his tone shifting into something Emily recognized as command mode. Tomorrow, you and I are going to San Francisco. We're going to retrieve that flash drive. We're going to find out what's on it. And we're going to discover who's been watching you for 3 years. Mr. DeLuca, I don't think... You don't work for me anymore, Emily. As of tonight, you're under my direct protection. That means you do exactly what I say, when I say it, without question. Because whoever sent those roses knows things about this house that my own security team doesn't. That makes them dangerous. And anything dangerous in my world needs to be eliminated. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Welcome to visibility, Emily Hart, or whoever you really are. I hope you're ready for what comes next. Emily drank, the whiskey burning her throat, and wondered if invisibility had been safer after all. But it was too late for wondering. Someone had seen her. Someone wanted her noticed. Someone was playing a game with pieces she didn't understand. And Adrian DeLuca, the most dangerous man she'd ever met, had just declared her his responsibility. The roses on her new nightstand seemed to mock her with their beauty. For the girl this house pretends not to see. She was seen now. And Emily had a terrible suspicion that being noticed by the wrong people was infinitely more dangerous than being invisible to everyone. Midnight. Emily couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too large, the silence too heavy with implications she didn't want to examine. Every shadow seemed to hide watchers, every sound suggested threats. She'd traded invisibility for a gilded cage, and the bars were closing tighter by the hour. Her dead phone sat on the nightstand, a reminder that someone had reached her despite all of Adrian's security, someone who'd been watching for 3 years, someone who knew about the flash drive, because why else target her now? After all this time, unless they'd been waiting, watching, building a complete picture before making their move. The thought sent ice through her veins. A soft sound made her freeze. Footsteps in the hallway. Deliberate. Unhurried. Emily held her breath as the footsteps stopped outside her door. A pause. Long enough that she started to think she'd imagined it. Then a piece of paper slid under the door. Emily stared at it, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain whoever was outside could hear it. She counted to 60, then another 60. Finally, when the footsteps retreated and silence reclaimed the hallway, she crossed to the door on trembling legs. The paper was cream-colored, expensive, familiar. The handwriting was the same as on the rose card. Emily Chen. Yes, I know your real name. 3 years ago, your boss stole something that belonged to Marcus Varelli. You helped him hide it. Now Marcus wants it back. Tomorrow, when Adrian takes you to San Francisco, you'll have a choice. Give Marcus what he wants, or watch Adrian discover that you're not a victim. You're an accomplice. Sweet dreams, little thief. The game is just beginning. Emily's hands shook so violently, the paper fluttered like a dying bird. Marcus Varelli. Even she, invisible for 3 years, knew that name. Marcus Varelli was the crime lord who made Adrian DeLuca look like a street thug. He controlled ports, politicians, and power across the entire West Coast. He was untouchable, unstoppable, and utterly without mercy. And apparently, Michael Chen had stolen something from him, which meant Emily had been carrying a death sentence in a safety deposit box for 3 years, thinking she was just keeping a nervous employer's insurance policy. She read the note again, her mind racing through impossible calculations. Tell Adrian the truth, and he'd know she'd lied by omission. He'd know she wasn't just a frightened employee. She was potentially complicit in theft from the most dangerous man in the country. Stay silent, and Marcus Varelli would use her against Adrian, would force her to betray the man who'd just sworn to protect her. Either way, she lost. Emily moved to the window, stared out at gardens that looked beautiful and treacherous in moonlight. She'd spent 3 years being invisible because visibility meant danger. Now she was the center of attention in a game between titans, and the only moves left to her were varying shades of suicide. Unless Emily's mind caught on a possibility. A slim, dangerous, probably insane possibility. What if she didn't choose at all? What if instead of being a pawn, she became a player? Michael Chen had given her the flash drive for a reason. He'd trusted her with something valuable enough that Marcus Varelli would hunt her for 3 years. Something important enough that Adrian DeLuca's interest was now personally engaged. What if that something was leverage? Emily returned to the note, studied the handwriting, analyzed the word choices. The author knew her real name, knew about Michael Chen, knew Marcus Varelli wanted the flash drive, knew Adrian planned to take her to San Francisco tomorrow, which meant the author had access to both Marcus's organization and Adrian's household, a spy in the DeLuca estate. Someone close enough to deliver notes to her door at midnight, someone playing both sides. Emily's pulse quickened as pieces started connecting. The roses hadn't been from Marcus. They'd been too subtle, too clever. Marcus Varelli crushed threats. He didn't send poetic calling cards. The roses were from the spy, someone who wanted her noticed, someone orchestrating this entire situation. But why? Emily paced the enormous room, her mind working through angles and implications. If she told Adrian about the note, he'd lock down the estate, interrogate staff, possibly violence his way to answers. But the spy was smart enough to have stayed hidden this long. They'd be smart enough to have contingencies. If she stayed silent, she'd be playing into Marcus's hands, becoming the weapon he needed against Adrian. Unless she found the spy first. Unless she figured out what was really on that flash drive before tomorrow's trip to San Francisco. Unless she stopped being the girl people sent roses to and became the girl who sent them. Emily retrieved the note, studied it under lamplight. The paper was expensive, but not distinctive. The handwriting was masculine, educated, careful. No fingerprints. The spy was too professional for that. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed she was still the frightened assistant who ran 3 years ago. The invisible girl who hid rather than fought. They didn't know that invisibility had been a choice, a strategy, a way to survive long enough to understand the game board. Emily had spent 3 years watching the DeLuca household, learning patterns, observing power structures, understanding how information flowed and where loyalty lived. She'd been invisible, but she'd been paying attention. And now, for the first time in 3 years, Emily Chen decided to stop hiding and start hunting. She had less than 8 hours before Adrian's planned trip to San Francisco. 8 hours to identify a spy, understand what was on that flash drive, and figure out how to survive the war between two crime lords. 8 hours to stop being a pawn and become a player. Emily smiled, a hard, cold expression that would have surprised anyone who thought they knew the invisible maid. Someone had decided to make her visible. She was about to show them exactly what they'd revealed. The roses on her nightstand didn't look like a threat anymore. They looked like a declaration of war. And Emily Chen was done being hunted. It was time to hunt back. The clock showed 2:47 a.m. when Emily finally moved. She'd spent nearly 3 hours sitting in darkness, letting her mind map the estate's patterns, the rotation of security shifts, the blind spots in camera coverage, the rhythms of a household that never truly slept. 3 years of invisible observation had given her knowledge that most prisoners never acquired about their cages. Now she was going to use it. Emily changed into dark clothes from her previous life, jeans and a black sweater she'd kept hidden at the bottom of her old staff locker. The designer outfit Sophia had delivered stayed untouched in the closet. Beautiful things for a beautiful prisoner, but Emily needed to move like a shadow again. Just one more time. She eased her door open, listening. The hallway cameras would record her movements, but Antonio wouldn't review footage until morning unless an alarm triggered. She had a window. Small, but sufficient. The house creaked and settled around her as she moved through corridors she knew by heart, past guest suites that hadn't housed guests in months, past Adrian's private wing, lights still burning behind his door because men like him rarely slept, past the formal rooms where power was displayed and deals were made, down to the basement levels where the real business of the estate happened. The security office would be manned, but the archive room beside it stayed locked and unmonitored except for the door itself. 3 years of cleaning had taught Emily which rooms mattered and which existed purely for appearance. The archive was appearance, a space for records that could be subpoenaed, sanitized versions of truth meant for lawyers and accountants. But the lock was real and expensive, and told Emily that something worth protecting lived behind it. She'd lifted Antonio's spare keycard 2 hours ago when he'd escorted her to dinner. A moment's sleight of hand while he was distracted by his phone, perfected through 3 years of being dismissed as harmless. He'd get it back before morning. He'd never know it was gone. The card reader blinked green. The lock disengaged with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the silent hallway. Emily slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The archive room smelled like paper and secrets. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each labeled with years and categories that probably meant something to Adrian's accountants. Emily ignored them. She wasn't looking for official records. She was looking for the gaps. 3 years of observing had taught her that Adrian DeLuca ran 2 parallel operations, the legitimate business empire that appeared in quarterly reports, and the shadow network that funded it. The official records lived in plain sight. The real power stayed hidden in negative space, in the things that weren't documented. Emily moved to the back wall where older files gathered dust. She ran her fingers along cabinet edges, feeling for inconsistencies, for spaces that didn't quite match their labels. The third cabinet clicked differently when she tested it. Emily pulled harder, and the entire front panel swung away to reveal a recessed safe with a biometric scanner. "Of course," she whispered. Nothing in Adrian's world was ever simple. She was about to retreat when she noticed something. The scanner's standby light was green instead of red. Someone had accessed this safe recently enough that it hadn't fully locked down again. Emily pressed her palm against the scanner, knowing it wouldn't work but testing anyway. The safe beeped once, twice, then it opened. Emily's breath caught. Either the security system was malfunctioning or someone had deliberately left this accessible. Neither option was comforting. Inside, she found 3 items: a leather journal, a manila envelope, and a USB drive that looked identical to the one Michael Chen had given her 3 years ago. Emily's hand shook as she reached for the journal. The handwriting inside was sharp, masculine, controlled. Adrian's handwriting, she realized. She'd seen it on the occasional note to staff, on documents she'd filed without reading. But this wasn't business correspondence. These were names, dates, transactions that turned her blood cold. Michael Chen's name appeared 17 times. Marcus Varelli's appeared 43. And her own name, Emily Chen, appeared exactly once with a notation that made her vision blur. Asset, unknowing carrier. Do not engage until necessary. The journal entry was dated 2 years and 8 months ago. Adrian had known who she was for nearly 3 years. had known about Michael Chen, had known she was hiding something, and he'd left her invisible, waiting for the perfect moment to make his move. Emily's mind reeled through implications. Every assumption she'd made was wrong. She wasn't a maid who'd accidentally caught Adrian's attention. She was a plant he'd allowed in his garden, watching her grow until she bore fruit he could harvest. The roses weren't from Marcus Varelli's spy. They were from Adrian, a test, a provocation, a way to force her hand and reveal what she knew. "You're smarter than I expected." Emily spun, her heart stopping. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, wearing dark slacks and an unbuttoned shirt, looking like violence wrapped in casual elegance. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something that might have been admiration or might have been threat. "How long have you been standing there?" Emily's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Long enough to watch you solve a puzzle that took my security team 6 months to design." He moved into the room with the controlled grace of a predator. "You're good at being invisible, Emily, but you're even better at paying attention while invisible. I respect that. You sent the roses." Not a question. "I sent the roses," Adrian confirmed. "I sent the messages. I killed your phone. I left that note under your door tonight. All of it designed to see what you'd do when pressure was applied." Emily's hand tightened on the journal. "Why?" "Because Marcus Varelli is making moves, and I needed to know if you were an innocent caught in the crossfire or a player on his board." Adrian's gaze dropped to the journal in her hands. "That contains 3 years of surveillance. Every conversation I've monitored, every connection I've traced, everything I know about the war that's coming." "And what do you know about me?" "That you're not Emily Hart, that you worked for Michael Chen, that he gave you something before Marcus Varelli disappeared him, that you've been hiding in my house for 3 years, thinking yourself safe." Adrian paused. "And that you're far more dangerous than you pretend to be." Emily met his eyes, saw the calculation there, and made a choice. Michael Chen was laundering money for Marcus Varelli, but he was skimming, not much, just enough to build an insurance policy. He compiled evidence, financial records, transaction logs, names of politicians and judges on Marcus's payroll, everything someone would need to destroy Varelli's empire. The flash drive in San Francisco. One of them. Michael was paranoid. He made copies, distributed them to people he trusted. Emily's laugh was bitter. "I wasn't one of those people. He gave me a copy because I was nobody, invisible. The last person anyone would suspect of carrying nuclear codes to a criminal empire." Adrian's expression shifted into something sharper. "How many copies?" "I don't know. Michael died before he could tell me." "Marcus didn't disappear Michael Chen," Adrian said quietly. "I did. On Marcus's orders, before I understood what I was destroying. By the time I learned the truth, Michael was already dead and his insurance policy was scattered to the winds." The confession hung between them like smoke. Emily processed this new reality. Adrian had executed her boss. The man who'd given her the flash drive, trusted her with his last desperate gamble, had died by Adrian DeLuca's hand. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because in approximately 4 hours, Marcus Varelli is going to make his move. He knows I know about the flash drives. He knows you're in my protection. He's going to force a choice. Give him what he wants, or watch people die." Adrian moved closer, close enough that Emily could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I need to know which side you're on when that choice comes." "I'm on the side of staying alive." "That's not a side. That's a fantasy." Adrian's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Marcus will never let you stay alive while you hold evidence that can destroy him. I can't let you leave while you hold leverage against my business interests. You're trapped between two forces that will eventually crush you unless you choose a direction and commit to it completely." Emily's pulse hammered. "What are you offering?" "Partnership. You give me the flash drive. I use it to leverage Marcus into backing down. You stay here, under my protection, until the war is over. Then you leave with a new identity, enough money to disappear properly, and my guarantee that no one will ever find you. And if I refuse, then I'm forced to assume you're working for Marcus, and we both know how I handle threats in my house." The menace in his tone was absolute. "I like you, Emily. I respect your intelligence, but don't mistake that for mercy I don't possess." Emily looked at the journal in her hands, at the evidence of surveillance and manipulation, at proof that she'd never been invisible, just observed from angles she couldn't see. "There's a third option," she said slowly. Adrian's eyebrow raised. "I'm listening." "We use the flash drive to destroy Marcus completely, not leverage annihilation. We leak everything to the FBI, the press, every rival who's been waiting for Marcus to show weakness. We burn his empire to ash and salt the earth behind it. That would start a war. There's already a war, you just said so." Emily stepped closer, feeling reckless, feeling alive for the first time in 3 years. "You want me to choose a side? Fine. I choose the side that ends this. No more running, no more hiding, no more being invisible while powerful men decide my fate." Adrian studied her with an intensity that should have been frightening. Instead, it ignited something dangerous in Emily's chest. "You understand what you're proposing," he said quietly. "Marcus has connections everywhere. Politicians, judges, police, even people in my organization. The moment we move against him, he'll retaliate with everything he has. Then we'd better make sure our first move counts." A slow smile crossed Adrian's face, predatory and pleased. "You've been planning this. How long?" "Since I read the midnight note. Since I realized someone was orchestrating this entire situation. I just needed to know who." Emily held up the journal. "Now I know. You've been 3 steps ahead this whole time. So tell me, Adrian, was the partnership offer real or another test?" "Both." He took the journal from her hands, his fingers brushing hers deliberately. "I needed to see if you'd run or fight. Most people run. I've been running for 3 years. I'm tired of it. Fighting Marcus Varelli isn't like fighting normal threats. He doesn't just kill his enemies, he erases them, makes examples that echo for generations." "Then we'll have to erase him first." Emily's voice was steady, certain. "I have the flash drive. You have the infrastructure. Together, we can do what Michael Chen died trying to accomplish." Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to the safe, retrieved the manila envelope, and handed it to her. "Open it." Inside were photographs. Emily's hands trembled as she laid them out on the cabinet top. Michael Chen, very much alive, photographed 3 weeks ago in Vancouver. Different hair, different face, courtesy of expensive surgery, but unmistakably him. The man she'd thought dead for 3 years was living a comfortable exile in Canada. "He's alive," Emily whispered. "He faked his death brilliantly. Used my execution as cover to disappear completely. Marcus thinks he's dead. I thought he was dead until 6 months ago when one of my contacts spotted him." Adrian's tone was carefully neutral. "He abandoned you, Emily. Gave you a flash drive and let you carry the risk while he built a new life." Emily stared at the photographs, feeling 3 years of grief and guilt transform into rage. Michael had let her run, let her hide, let her think she was honoring a dead man's final request, when really she was just his disposable insurance policy. "Does he know I'm here?" Her voice was ice. "No. He thinks you're still invisible, still safe, still carrying his leverage against the day he might need it." Emily gathered the photographs with shaking hands. "Good. What are you thinking?" "That I want him to watch when his careful plans burn. That I want him to know it was me." She met Adrian's eyes. "Can you arrange that?" Adrian's smile was pure danger. "I can arrange anything, but it'll cost you." "Name your price." "Complete honesty, no more invisibility, no more running. You work with me as an equal partner in this, which means you trust me with everything you know and everything you are. No more Emily Hart the maid, just Emily Chen, the woman who's going to help me destroy Marcus Varelli." Emily considered the offer, weighed the risks, and recognized the trap hidden in the partnership. Once she committed to this path, there was no escape. Adrian would own her truths, her secrets, her vulnerabilities. But he already did, she realized. He'd owned them for 3 years. At least this way, she'd own some of his in return. "Equal partners," she said, extending her hand. Adrian took it, his grip firm and warm. "Equal partners. Until Marcus is ash and Michael is accountable. And then? Then we reassess. See if partnership still serves us both." His thumb brushed across her knuckles before releasing her hand. But first, we need to retrieve that flash drive before Marcus makes his move. You said 4 hours. 3.5 now. We need to leave for San Francisco in 90 minutes if we want to stay ahead of his timeline. Emily's mind raced through logistics. If you've known about the flash drive for this long, why wait until now? Because until tonight, I didn't know if you could be trusted, if you were strong enough for what comes next. Adrian's expression softened fractionally. I needed to see if you'd break under pressure or sharpen into a blade. You sharpened. Now we use that edge to cut. What happens when Marcus realizes you're moving against him? War. Immediate, brutal, absolute. Adrian said it like he was discussing the weather. He'll strike at my businesses, my holdings, my people. He'll try to isolate me politically and financially, and he'll come after you specifically because you represent leverage he can't afford to leave in play. Sounds dangerous. Sounds like Tuesday in my world. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. Emily, there's something you should understand before we do this. I'm not a good man. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. I'm offering you partnership, but I'm not offering redemption or romance or anything that looks like safety. I'm not asking for those things. What are you asking for? Emily thought about invisibility, about 3 years of hiding, about roses that were really threats and protection that was really possession. A chance to stop being afraid, she said finally. A chance to finish what Michael started. A chance to prove I'm more than just a pawn someone moves around a board. Adrian studied her for a long moment. You'll get that chance. But Emily, once we start this, there's no going back. You understand that? I've been point of no return since the roses arrived. At least now I'm choosing the direction. Fair enough. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed a quick message. I'm alerting Antonio that we're leaving early. I'm also activating certain assets that Marcus doesn't know I have. By the time we land in San Francisco, the chessboard will be set. And if Marcus is expecting this, then we adapt. That's what separates survivors from casualties. The ability to think 3 moves ahead while executing the current play perfectly. He offered a slight smile. You've been doing that for 3 years. This is just a different game with higher stakes. Emily followed him out of the archive room, her mind already mapping the moves ahead. Retrieve the flash drive. Verify its contents. Make copies. Leak strategically to maximize damage while minimizing blowback. Adrian, she said as they climbed stairs toward the main floor, when this is over, when Marcus is destroyed and Michael is exposed, what happens to me? He didn't answer immediately. They'd reached the 3rd floor hallway before he finally spoke. That depends entirely on who you become during the war. Fight well enough, prove yourself valuable enough, and you might earn a permanent place in my world. His tone was carefully neutral. Or you might decide you want nothing to do with any of this and take the exit I promised. Either way, the choice will be yours. Will it? Really? Adrian stopped, turned to face her fully. I don't keep people who don't want to stay. I acquire allies and eliminate threats. But I don't traffic in slaves or prisoners. You'll have choices, Emily. They might all be terrible, but they'll be yours to make. It wasn't reassurance exactly, but it was honesty. Emily could work with honesty. I need to change clothes, she said, the ones Sophia brought. If we're going to war, I should probably look the part. Adrian's smile was genuine this time. Yes, you should. Meet me in the garage in 45 minutes. Bring nothing you're not willing to abandon if we need to run. Emily returned to her gilded cage and stared at the designer clothes hanging in precise rows. She selected a black silk blouse and tailored pants that wouldn't restrict movement, shoes with enough heel to look professional, but low enough to run in if necessary, a leather jacket that probably cost more than her previous yearly salary. She caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. 3 years of invisibility had trained her to avoid mirrors, to not see herself too clearly. Now she looked directly at the woman staring back. Blonde hair that caught light even in dim rooms, gray eyes that had witnessed too much, a face that could be either forgettable or striking depending on how much attention she invited. Emily Chen. Not Emily Hart, not invisible, not safe. Just a woman about to go to war beside a man who'd orchestrated her entire awakening. The roses on her nightstand had wilted slightly overnight. Emily touched one dying petal and smiled. Someone had tried to make her visible as a power play. Instead, they'd created something far more dangerous, a woman who'd stopped hiding and started hunting. Emily pocketed the midnight note, left the dead phone behind, and walked out of the room that had been her cage. She'd spent 3 years being invisible. Now she was going to make sure everyone saw her coming. The garage was underground, climate-controlled, and housed enough expensive machinery to fund a small country. Adrian stood beside a black Mercedes SUV, speaking quietly into his phone. He ended the call when he saw her approaching. "Good choices," he said, assessing her outfit with professional efficiency. "You look like someone who belongs in my world now." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation. In my world, appearances are weapons. You're learning to arm yourself appropriately." He opened the passenger door. "Antonio is staying here to maintain the illusion of normal security. 2 of my most trusted people will meet us at the airport. From there, we go dark. No electronic communications, no traceable movements." Emily slid into the vehicle. "Marcus will know the moment we leave." "Of course he will. I'm counting on it." Adrian started the engine and the garage door rolled open to reveal pre-dawn darkness. "He'll expect me to go to San Francisco for the flash drive. He'll have people watching the bank, watching the airport, watching every move. What he won't expect is for me to already have the flash drive's contents." Emily's head snapped toward him. "What?" Adrian pulled a USB drive from his pocket, identical to the ones she'd seen in the safe, and the one supposedly waiting in San Francisco. "You're not the only one Michael Chen gave a copy to. He had insurance policies scattered across 3 continents. I acquired one 6 months ago from a particularly nervous accountant in Hong Kong." "Then why do we need mine?" "Because yours is the one Marcus knows about, the one he'll focus all his attention on retrieving. While he's watching San Francisco, I'll be moving pieces he doesn't know exist." Adrian navigated through the estate's security gates. "You're the distraction, Emily. The visible threat that keeps Marcus's eyes on the wrong board." Emily processed this, felt the manipulation behind it, and laughed. "You magnificent bastard. This whole thing, the roses, the protection, the partnership offer, it's all been theater." "Not all of it." Adrian's tone was serious. "The partnership is real, so is the war. I just needed you committed before revealing the full strategy." "And if I'd run instead of fought? Then you'd have been on a plane to protective custody by dawn, and I'd have found another angle to approach Marcus." He glanced at her. "But you didn't run. You broke into my archive room, solved my puzzle, and offered to burn down an empire. That kind of courage is rare, useful, worth investing in." "You're using me." "We're using each other. There's a difference." Adrian accelerated onto the highway, the city lights beginning to wake around them. "You get your revenge against Michael. You get to finish what he started. You get protection and resources you couldn't access alone. In return, I get a partner who understands the stakes and has personal motivation to see this through." Emily couldn't argue with the logic. "What's on the flash drive?" "Everything Michael promised and more. Bank accounts, shell companies, payoffs to federal judges, evidence of contract killings, including the one I carried out thinking I was following legitimate orders." Adrian's jaw tightened. Marcus kept detailed records. His paranoia made him meticulous. That meticulousness is going to destroy him. "When do we release it?" 48 hours from now. We need time to position assets, secure vulnerabilities, and make sure the leak comes from sources that can't be traced back to us directly." He took an exit toward the private airport. "In the meantime, we're going to San Francisco to retrieve your flash drive, verify it matches what I have, and let Marcus's people observe us doing exactly what he expects, while really accomplishing something else entirely." "Exactly, you're learning." Adrian pulled into the airport's private terminal. "From this moment forward, assume everything you say and do is being monitored. Marcus has reach. The walls have ears and eyes. So we perform our roles perfectly: concerned protector and frightened asset seeking safety." A sleek jet waited on the tarmac, engines already warming. 2 figures stood beside it, a woman with severe features and military posture, and a man built like a tank with intelligent eyes. "Claire handles my intelligence operations," Adrian said. "Marcus runs my logistics. They know everything I know about this situation, which means they know everything about you." Emily climbed out of the vehicle, met their assessing gazes, and refused to flinch. If she was going to be a partner instead of a pawn, she needed to act like one. "Miss Chen," Claire said, her voice crisp and British. Mr. DeLuca speaks very highly of your capabilities. I hope his confidence is justified. It is, Emily replied, channeling 3 years of invisible observation into visible confidence. I assume you verified the San Francisco angle? Marcus, the logistics expert, nodded. 3 of Varelli's people are already positioned near the bank. Amateur surveillance. They want to be seen, which means the real watchers are better hidden. Can you identify them? Working on it. We'll know before we land. Marcus's accent was Eastern European, his manner efficient. The question is whether we engage or observe. Adrian answered before Emily could. Observe only. Let them report that we retrieved the drive. Let Marcus think he knows our next move. They boarded the jet, and Emily sank into leather seats that probably cost more than her childhood home. The cabin was configured for business, work surfaces, secure communications, enough technology to run a small war, which, she supposed, was exactly what they were about to do. As the jet lifted into dawn sky, Emily stared out the window at the city falling away below. Somewhere down there, Marcus Varelli was making his own preparations. Michael Chen was living his comfortable exile, unaware that his past was about to detonate, and hundreds of people were going about their lives, invisible to the chess match being played above their heads. Emily understood that invisibility now. She'd lived it, perfected it, used it to survive, but survival wasn't enough anymore. Now she wanted victory. Adrian settled into the seat across from her, laptop open, already coordinating moves she couldn't see. He looked up, caught her watching him, and offered a slight smile. No regrets? He asked. Emily thought about roses and threats, about 3 years hiding and 3 hours hunting, about the moment she'd stopped being invisible and started being dangerous. Only that I didn't do this sooner, she said. Adrian's smile widened. Then let's make sure Marcus regrets ever sending those roses. The jet climbed toward cruising altitude, carrying them toward San Francisco and the flash drive that would either save them or destroy them. Emily Chen was done being the girl no one saw. Now she was the girl they'd wished they'd never noticed. And Marcus Varelli was about to learn the difference. San Francisco emerged through morning fog like a memory half remembered. Golden bridges suspended in mist, hills climbing toward uncertain sky, a city built on fault lines that had learned to dance with destruction. Emily pressed her palm against the window as the jet descended, watching the urban sprawl resolve into distinct neighborhoods. Somewhere down there was the safety deposit box she'd rented under a false name 3 years ago. Somewhere was the life she'd abandoned. Somewhere was the invisible girl she used to be. Second thoughts? Claire asked from across the cabin. The intelligence operative had spent the flight reviewing security footage on 3 different screens, her expression never changing from professional assessment. Just remembering, Emily said. This was supposed to be my fresh start. New city, new name, new life where no one would find me. And instead you ran straight into the DeLuca estate. Claire's tone held something that might have been sympathy. Sometimes the safest hiding place is the most dangerous one. Adrian ended a call and crossed to them, moving with the easy confidence of someone who owned whatever space he occupied. Marcus is tracking the jet. He knows we're heading to San Francisco. 3 teams mobilizing, 1 at the bank, 1 at our most likely hotel, 1 holding position near the airport. Expected, Marcus said without looking up from his own laptop. The logistics expert had been coordinating their ground operations with the efficiency of a military campaign. Our people are already in position. We'll have eyes on their eyes within the hour. Emily watched the interplay between Adrian's team and realized she was seeing something most people never witnessed, the machinery of power operating at full capacity. These weren't thugs or hired muscle. They were professionals executing a strategy with precision that rivaled any corporate operation. The bank opens at 9, Emily said. My box is registered under the name Sarah Mitchell. I'll need identification that matches. Claire produced a wallet from her bag and handed it over. Inside was a California driver's license, credit cards, even a grocery store loyalty card, all bearing Emily's photograph and the name Sarah Mitchell. How long have you had this ready? Emily asked. Since Adrian identified you 2 years ago, Claire replied calmly. We prepare contingencies for all potential assets. You were always going to need extraction documents eventually. The only question was when and under what circumstances. Emily stared at the license, at her own face paired with a stranger's name, and felt the full weight of Adrian's long game. He'd been planning this moment for years, moving pieces into position while she thought herself invisible. "Does anything surprise you?" she asked him. Adrian's smile was slight. "Constantly. People surprise me. You surprise me. I expected you to run when pressure was applied. Instead, you chose to fight. That's the kind of surprise that makes strategies succeed or fail." The jet touched down with barely a tremor. Through the window, Emily saw a black SUV waiting on the tarmac, identical to the one they'd left at Adrian's estate. Symmetry as strategy, she was learning. Make every move look like every other move until the moment you break pattern and catch your enemy unprepared. They deplaned into cool morning air that tasted like salt and exhaust. The city hummed around them, traffic building, people starting their days, millions of lives intersecting without awareness of the war being waged in their midst. "Stay close," Adrian said quietly as they approached the SUV. "From here until we're airborne again, assume hostile eyes on all sides. Marcus won't move openly. He can't afford the exposure, but he'll be watching for any indication that you're more than what you appear to be." "Which is what exactly?" "A frightened former employee seeking protection from her powerful employer. Someone who needs me to retrieve dangerous information she's been hiding." His hand found the small of her back, proprietary and protective. "Let him see exactly what he expects. Vulnerability attracts certain kinds of predators." Emily understood the subtext. She was bait, the visible lure, while Adrian's real plans moved in shadows she couldn't see. The drive into the city took 40 minutes through traffic that moved like blood through partially blocked arteries. Emily watched familiar streets pass, restaurants where she'd eaten cheap meals, parks where she'd walked trying to feel normal, the laundromat where she'd first seen the news about Michael Chen's disappearance. Everything looked smaller now, less significant. The life she'd built here had been constructed from fear and sustained by invisibility. Now that she understood the architecture of her own cage, she couldn't imagine how she'd ever felt safe within it. "There," Marcus said from the driver's seat, gesturing subtly toward a sedan parked across from the bank. "First team. 2 occupants, both armed based on posture analysis. Professional, but not elite." "The decoys," Claire confirmed. "The real surveillance will be mobile and varied, at least 3 more teams within a 2-block radius." Adrian's phone buzzed. He read the message and smiled. "Our people have identified 2 additional units, one in a delivery van, one posing as construction workers, all focused on the bank entrance." "Which means they haven't identified our real objective," Emily said, following the logic. "They think the flash drive is the target, when really it's the distraction." Quick study. Adrian's approval was evident. "We retrieve your drive, verify its contents match mine, and let Marcus's people observe the entire process. They report back that we have what we came for. Marcus assumes he knows our next move." "And our actual next move?" "Already in progress." Adrian showed her his phone screen. Financial news scrolling past, minor stories about regulatory investigations, whispers of federal interest in certain import-export operations, unnamed sources suggesting major announcements pending. Emily scanned the articles and saw the pattern. Small detonations designed to make Marcus nervous, to force him into defensive positions, to blind him to the larger offensive being prepared. "You're boxing him in," she said, "making him focus on protecting what he has instead of attacking what threatens him." War is 90% positioning and 10% violence. The violence gets the attention, but the positioning determines who survives. Adrian pocketed his phone. "We're making Marcus defend on multiple fronts. By the time he realizes which threat is real, it'll be too late to counter effectively." The SUV pulled to the curb 3 blocks from the bank. Emily's pulse accelerated despite her attempt at calm. This was really happening. 3 years of hiding was about to culminate in walking directly into Marcus Varelli's crosshairs. "Claire and Marcus will establish overwatch," Adrian said. "You and I walk to the bank like we're conducting normal business. We retrieve the drive. We verify contents at a secure location. We return to the jet. Simple and straightforward." "Nothing about this is simple," Emily muttered. "No, but it needs to appear that way. Complexity reveals strategy. Simplicity conceals it." He opened his door, waited for her to exit, then offered his arm like they were attending a social function rather than walking into a trap. Ready? Emily took his arm, felt the solid strength beneath expensive fabric, and nodded. Ready. They walked toward the bank through morning crowds, professionals heading to offices, students rushing to classes, homeless individuals seeking warmth in doorways. Normal life flowing around them like water around stones, unaware that two people passing by were carrying enough explosive information to reshape the city's power structure. Emily spotted the surveillance sedan immediately, tried not to stare, tried to move like someone frightened rather than someone cataloging tactical positions. They're photographing us, she said quietly. Of course they are. Evidence to show Marcus that we did exactly what he predicted. Let them document everything. Adrian's hand covered hers on his arm. To observers, it probably looked comforting. Emily felt the warning in his grip. Stay in character, maintain the performance. The bank was old San Francisco money. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of institutional permanence that suggested stability even as everything around it changed. Emily approached the receptionist with the Sarah Mitchell identification in hand. I need to access my safety deposit box, she said, keeping her voice steady. Number 247. The receptionist checked records, verified identification, and summoned a bank officer to escort them to the vault. Standard procedure, executed with practiced efficiency. Nothing to suggest that the contents of Box 247 could destroy one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. The vault was underground, climate-controlled, lined with boxes of varying sizes. The officer used Emily's key and his own to open 247, then discreetly withdrew to provide privacy. Inside was a single USB drive in a sealed plastic bag, exactly where Emily had placed it 3 years ago. Her hands trembled as she retrieved it. This small piece of technology had defined her life for so long, the reason she'd run, the justification for invisibility, the insurance policy that had become a prison sentence. May I? Adrian asked, extending his hand. Emily gave him the drive, watched him examine it with professional assessment, then slip it into his pocket. We'll verify contents at the secure location, he said. For now, we've accomplished what we came for. They returned to street level, walked back toward the SUV through crowds that had thickened with late morning activity. Emily felt exposed, vulnerable, every survival instinct screaming that they were being watched from angles she couldn't identify. Behind us, Adrian murmured. 2 men, athletic build, moving to intercept. Not Marcus's style, too direct. Someone else is playing. Emily risked a glance backward and saw them, young, confident, moving with purpose through the crowd. Not trying to blend, trying to intimidate. Keep walking, Adrian said. Claire has eyes on them. If they make a move, we respond. Until then, we maintain course. The men were closing distance, 20 feet, 15, 10. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. Change of plans, he said, pulling Emily into a narrow alley between buildings. Those aren't Marcus's people. They're federal agents. Emily's world tilted. What? Marcus isn't the only one who's been watching you. The FBI has had a surveillance team on this bank for 6 months, waiting to see who accessed the boxes registered to known associates of Michael Chen. Adrian was already moving deeper into the alley, pulling her with him. Someone leaked information about Chen's insurance policies to federal investigators. They've been building a case. Against Marcus? Against everyone. You, me, anyone connected to those flash drives. He reached a service door, produced a key that shouldn't have worked but did, and pushed her through into a building's basement. We just walked into a federal trap disguised as Marcus's operation. They ran through basement corridors that smelled like mildew and secrets. Adrian navigated with certainty that suggested he'd scouted this route previously. Always planning, Emily realized. Always 3 steps ahead, even when appearing to make mistakes. Where are we going? She gasped. Secondary extraction point. Claire and Marcus are already moving to intercept. Adrian pulled her up a stairwell, through a door marked Authorized Personnel Only, and into an underground parking structure. The FBI wants you as a witness against Marcus. Marcus wants you dead to eliminate evidence, and I need you alive and cooperative to execute my strategy. You're now the most valuable commodity in a 3-way negotiation. A nondescript sedan waited in the shadows, engine running. Claire was at the wheel, Marcus in the passenger seat, both wearing expressions of controlled urgency. Emily and Adrian dove into the back seat. Claire accelerated before the doors fully closed, tires squealing on concrete as they spiraled up towards street level. Federal units are mobilizing, Marcus reported. 3 vehicles converging on the bank. They know we slipped the trap. Can they track us? Not through conventional means. This vehicle is clean. No GPS, no electronics they can ping. We have approximately 8 minutes before they establish a perimeter. Claire navigated through traffic with aggressive precision. Airport is compromised. They'll have it locked down within 15 minutes. Adrian was already adapting. Secondary airfield. Marcus, coordinate with our pilot for immediate departure from Oakland. Claire, route us through industrial districts. Fewer cameras, more variables to complicate aerial surveillance. What about Marcus's people? Emily asked, her mind racing to keep up with the rapidly evolving situation. If the FBI is moving, he'll know something went wrong. Let him wonder. Uncertainty is a weapon. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. I'm sending a message to a mutual contact, someone who'll carry information to Marcus that we've been detained for questioning. It buys us time while he decides whether to interfere or let federal authorities do his work for him. The sedan merged onto a freeway, immediately caught in the slow grind of Bay Area traffic. Claire cursed quietly in British-accented frustration. This isn't viable, she said. We're boxed in. Traffic is too heavy for effective evasion. Then we go to ground, Adrian decided. Marcus, activate the Market Street safe house. We hold position there while the situation develops. That safe house is burned, Marcus objected. We used it for the Henderson extraction. Marcus knows about it. Exactly. He knows it's burned, which means he won't expect us to use it. Sometimes the most obvious move is the most invisible. Adrian met Emily's eyes. How do you feel about being held hostage? Emily blinked. Excuse me? The FBI wants you. Marcus wants you. Both believe you're a victim in this scenario, someone who stumbled into dangerous information through no fault of your own. If you're taken hostage, if I'm forcing your cooperation, it maintains that narrative while giving us operational flexibility. You want me to pretend you've kidnapped me. Not pretend. Actually do it. Publicly, dramatically. Give both federal agents and Marcus's people a story they can believe and react to predictably. Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing dinner plans rather than staged abduction. You become the damsel. I become the obvious villain, and while everyone focuses on rescuing you, we move the pieces that actually matter. Emily processed the strategy, saw the elegant manipulation within it, and felt something like admiration despite herself. You've been planning this contingency. I plan for every contingency. It's how I've survived this long in a business where most people don't see their 40th birthday. He glanced at his watch. We have approximately 5 minutes before decisions become permanent. Are you willing to trust me with this? Emily thought about trust, how she'd trusted Michael Chen and he'd abandoned her, how she'd trusted invisibility and it had failed, how trust itself was just another form of vulnerability that people like Adrian weaponized. But she'd already chosen this path, already committed to the war. What do you need me to do? She asked. Adrian's smile was approving and dangerous. Exactly what comes naturally. Look terrified, cooperate reluctantly, and wait for my signal to turn the tables. Can you do that? I spent 3 years being invisible. I can spend a few hours being visible in exactly the way you need. Good. Adrian pulled a phone from his pocket. Not his personal device, but a burner, cheap and disposable. He dialed a number, waited for connection, then spoke with controlled urgency. This is DeLuca. I have Emily Chen. The FBI just tried to take her at the bank. I'm ensuring she doesn't fall into custody before we can negotiate terms. If Marcus wants what she's carrying, he knows how to reach me. He ended the call and immediately destroyed the phone, crushing it beneath his heel. Who was that? Emily asked. A lawyer who works for both Marcus and various federal contacts. He'll pass the message to all interested parties within the hour. By noon, everyone will know I've taken you by force to prevent federal detention. The narrative writes itself from there. Claire exited the freeway into industrial neighborhoods where warehouses hunched like sleeping giants, and streets were empty of civilian traffic. She pulled into a parking structure attached to a building that looked abandoned, its windows dark and its exterior tagged with graffiti. This is the burned safe house? Emily asked skeptically. Appearances can be deceiving, Marcus said, already exiting the vehicle. This building is owned through 17 shell companies and maintained to look derelict while actually housing some of our most sensitive operations. The FBI investigated it 2 years ago and found nothing. They won't look twice now. They entered through a service entrance that opened onto stairs climbing into darkness. Marcus led the way with the confidence of someone navigating familiar territory. 3 flights up, through a door disguised as structural wall, and into a space that contradicted everything the exterior suggested. The safe house was modern, well-appointed, equipped with technology that probably cost more than the building it was hidden inside. Monitors showing multiple camera feeds, secure communication systems, weapons stored in elegant cabinets like fine china. "Welcome to my favorite contradiction," Adrian said, gesturing to the space. "Poverty on the outside, power on the inside. A perfect metaphor for how this city actually works." Claire immediately moved to the monitors, scanning feeds with professional efficiency. Federal vehicles are establishing perimeter around the bank. They're interviewing witnesses. I count at least 15 agents on scene. And Marcus's people? Withdrew the moment FBI arrived. Professional courtesy or tactical repositioning, unclear which. Adrian settled into a chair before the main monitor array, his posture relaxed despite the chaos they'd just escaped. Now we wait. Give everyone time to process the new narrative. Let them make assumptions and commit to strategies based on incomplete information. Emily moved to the windows, one-way glass that allowed views of the street below while preventing observation from outside. She could see the city continuing its daily rhythms, oblivious to the power games being played in the spaces between its official narratives. "What happens when they realize you haven't actually kidnapped me?" she asked. "When they discover I'm cooperating willingly?" "By then, it won't matter. The flash drive's contents will already be in motion. The war will have started in earnest." Adrian's phone, his actual phone this time, buzzed with incoming messages. He read them with an expression that shifted from neutral to satisfied. And right on schedule, Marcus is reaching out to negotiate. He showed Emily the screen, a text from an unknown number. "We should discuss terms regarding our mutual problem. Neutral ground, 2 hours." "He's taking the bait," Emily said. "Of course he is. Marcus thinks I'm desperate. FBI, breathing down my neck, volatile asset in my possession, resources stretched managing multiple crises. He thinks he has leverage." Adrian typed a response, his fingers moving with decisive confidence. "What he doesn't know is that I've already leaked portions of the flash drive to 6 different federal prosecutors through anonymous channels. By tomorrow morning, indictments will be prepared. By tomorrow afternoon, his empire will be under siege." "And Michael Chen?" Adrian's expression darkened. "Michael is about to receive a very unpleasant surprise. Claire has people moving on his Vancouver location as we speak. When this is over, he'll answer for abandoning you to carry his consequences." Emily felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Revenge. She'd spent 3 years running from her past, and now she was sprinting directly toward it with enough momentum to shatter everything in her path. "I want to be there," she said. "When you confront Michael, I want him to see my face and know that I survived, that I'm not the disposable insurance policy he left behind." "You'll get your moment," Adrian promised. "But first we finish with Marcus. Destroy the empire, eliminate the threat, then deal with the architect who built your cage." Claire looked up from her monitors. "Marcus is confirming the meeting. 2 hours. Pier 39. Public location with enough civilian presence to discourage violence." "He's playing it safe," Marcus observed. "Wants witnesses to ensure I don't simply eliminate him." Adrian stood, stretched, and smiled with predatory satisfaction. "Then let's give him the meeting he expects. Emily, you're coming with me. Visible cooperation under duress. Let Marcus see that I have control of the situation. And if he tries to take me by force, then he discovers that control is an illusion I'm allowing him to believe." Adrian moved to one of the weapon cabinets, selected a compact pistol, and offered it to her. "Do you know how to use this?" Emily took the weapon, checked the safety, verified the magazine, muscle memory from a past she'd tried to forget. Her father had been a cop before cancer took him. He'd taught her to shoot on weekends at ranges where she'd been the only teenage girl among middle-aged men. "I know how," she said quietly. "Good. Keep it concealed but accessible. If this negotiation goes wrong, I need you capable of defending yourself." He selected his own weapon, holstered it beneath his jacket with practiced ease. Claire, Marcus, you'll provide overwatch from adjacent positions, civilian clothing, tourist profiles ready to intervene if the situation deteriorates. And if Marcus brings significant force, Claire asked, then we've miscalculated his desperation and we adapt accordingly. Adrian checked his watch. We have 90 minutes. I suggest everyone prepare mentally for the possibility that this meeting becomes the opening shot of a very ugly war. Emily excused herself to a bathroom that was surprisingly luxurious for a building that pretended to be abandoned. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Same face, same gray eyes, but something fundamental had changed in the past 24 hours. The invisible girl was truly gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, someone who could hold a weapon without trembling and contemplate violence without flinching. Was this who she'd always been underneath the performance of helplessness? Or was this who Adrian was creating through careful manipulation and strategic pressure? Emily wasn't sure she knew the answer, wasn't sure she wanted to. Her phone buzzed, the new phone Claire had given her during the flight. A message from Adrian. Second thoughts are normal. Following through despite them is what separates survivors from casualties. You're stronger than you think. Trust that strength. Emily read the message twice, trying to parse genuine encouragement from strategic motivation. With Adrian, everything served multiple purposes. Even kindness was a tactic, but maybe that was okay. Maybe in a world where trust was weaponized and vulnerability was exploited, tactical kindness was the closest approximation to genuine care that people like them could manage. She returned to the main room where Adrian, Claire, and Marcus were reviewing tactical maps of Pier 39 and the surrounding area. 17 cameras in the immediate vicinity, Marcus was saying, all accessible through city systems. We can monitor in real time and preserve evidence if necessary. Federal presence? Adrian asked. Minimal, but existing. 2 pairs of agents maintaining random patrol patterns. They won't interfere unless situation becomes overtly criminal. And Marcus's probable backup? At least 3 teams positioned around the pier. He'll play this as cautiously as we are. Visible negotiation with invisible insurance. Claire tapped several points on the map. These positions offer best sightlines and escape routes. I recommend we mirror his deployment. Adrian studied the map with the intensity of a general planning invasion. Then he looked at Emily. Last chance to reconsider, he said. Once we're in play, there's no calling time out. You'll be exposed, vulnerable, and entirely dependent on my ability to control a situation involving hostile parties on multiple sides. If you have doubts, now's the time to voice them. Emily thought about 3 years of invisibility, about roses that were really threats, about Michael Chen living comfortably in exile while she carried his consequences, about Marcus Varelli, who'd built an empire on the bodies of people who'd trusted the wrong promises. No doubts, she said. Let's finish this. Adrian's smile was genuine this time, not tactical or strategic, but honestly pleased. Then let's go to war. They prepared in focused silence, weapons checked, communications tested, backup plans rehearsed. The military precision of it all should have been frightening. Instead, Emily found it oddly comforting. These people knew what they were doing. They'd survived worse situations through planning and execution. If she was going to walk into Marcus Varelli's crosshairs, at least she was doing it alongside professionals. 90 minutes later, they departed the safe house in 2 vehicles, Emily and Adrian in one, Claire and Marcus in another. The drive to Pier 39 took 20 minutes through midday traffic that moved with characteristic San Francisco unpredictability. Emily watched the city pass, cataloging changes from 3 years ago. New construction, closed businesses, the constant churn of urban evolution that continued regardless of individual dramas. Nervous? Adrian asked. Terrified, Emily admitted, but also angry and ready. Is that strange? That's normal for people who've been pushed past their breaking point. Fear and fury aren't opposites, they're collaborators. He glanced at her. Michael Chen did you a favor by abandoning you, even if it didn't feel like one at the time. He taught you that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. Is that what you believe? That we're all ultimately alone? I believe we're alone until we find people worth the risk of alliance. Then we're alone together, which is infinitely better than being alone and isolated. Adrian's tone was contemplative. You and I, we're alone together now, partners in the specific sense that our survival depends on mutual support. That's not friendship or romance. It's something more pragmatic and possibly more durable. Emily considered this philosophy. Transactional relationships elevated to partnership through shared necessity. It was cynical and probably accurate. Nothing about Adrian suggested sentiment or softness. But there was honesty in his approach, a clarity that was almost refreshing after years of invisible performance. Partners, she said, until the war is over. And possibly after, if partnership continues serving us both. He pulled into a parking structure near the pier. But first, we survived the next hour. Everything else is speculation. They exited the vehicle and walked toward Pier 39 through crowds of tourists photographing sea lions, eating overpriced seafood, buying souvenirs they'd forget they owned within months. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that two individuals passing by were about to negotiate terms with one of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Emily spotted Marcus's people immediately, subtle but visible to someone looking for them. Adrian had been right about the mirror deployment. Both sides were playing the same game with the same strategies. There, Adrian murmured, gesturing subtly toward a man standing near the railing overlooking the bay. Marcus Varelli looked nothing like Emily expected. She'd built an image in her mind, scarred, brutal, obviously dangerous. The reality was almost disappointing. He was average height, average build, wearing expensive casual clothes that suggested wealth without advertising it. His face was pleasant, forgettable, the kind that would disappear in a crowd. Only his eyes betrayed him. They were calculating, cold, utterly without the warmth his smile projected. Mr. DeLuca, Marcus said as they approached, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent. And this must be the famous Emily Chen, the girl who's caused us all so much trouble. Mr. Varelli, Adrian replied with professional courtesy that concealed absolute contempt. Thank you for meeting on short notice. When the FBI starts making moves, short notice becomes urgent necessity. Marcus's gaze shifted to Emily, assessing her with the clinical attention of someone evaluating merchandise. You've been very clever, Miss Chen, hiding in plain sight for 3 years. I respect the strategy, even as it complicated my operations. Emily forced herself to meet his eyes. I was just trying to survive. Survival is the highest form of victory. Everything else is embellishment. Marcus gestured to a bench overlooking the water. Shall we discuss terms like civilized people, or do we need to maintain this exhausting performance of threat and counter-threat? Adrian guided Emily to the bench, positioning himself between her and Marcus in a gesture that looked protective, but actually served to control sightlines and limit Marcus's ability to make sudden moves. Let's be clear about the situation, Adrian said. Emily has information that threatens your empire. I have Emily. The FBI has interest in both of you. We're all holding knives to each other's throats and calling it negotiation. Accurate summary. Marcus settled onto the bench with calculated relaxation. So the question becomes, who cuts first and who bleeds out? Or we could all lower our knives and find a solution that allows everyone to survive. Adrian's tone suggested he didn't actually believe this was possible, but was willing to explore the option. Marcus laughed, genuine amusement that didn't reach his cold eyes. You're proposing cooperation? How refreshingly naive. Tell me, Mr. DeLuca, do you actually think I'm going to let the two of you walk away carrying evidence that could destroy everything I've built over 30 years? I think you're going to carefully consider your options and choose the one that maximizes your survival probability, Adrian replied, because right now you're facing federal investigation, internal organization instability, and the very real possibility that I've already distributed copies of Chen's flash drive to parties who would love to watch you burn. Marcus's expression didn't change, but Emily saw his jaw tighten fractionally. A tell. He was worried. Bluffing is risky when the stakes are this high, Marcus said. Then call my bluff. Make a move, see what happens. Adrian's voice was soft, dangerous. Or we can discuss the alternative, a negotiated surrender where you maintain some dignity instead of losing everything in spectacular public collapse. The tension stretched between them like wire about to snap. Emily held her breath, acutely aware of the weapon concealed at her waist, of Claire and Marcus positioned somewhere in the crowd, of federal agents who might be watching this entire exchange. Finally, Marcus Varelli smiled. It was a terrible expression, empty of everything except calculation. "You've already leaked the information," he said. "This entire meeting is theater. You're not negotiating. You're watching me realize I've already lost." "Not lost," Adrian corrected. "Strategically repositioned. There's a difference. The flash drive information will be released, yes. But how it's released and what story accompanies it remains negotiable." "You're offering me narrative control in exchange for what exactly?" "Peaceful transition. You step back from operations, hand control to designated successors, cooperate with selective federal prosecution that targets your enemies while granting you immunity. You lose the empire but keep your life and freedom." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the bay where boats moved in lazy patterns and tourists laughed without awareness of the power exchange happening feet away. "And Emily?" he asked finally. "Disappears. New identity, new life. My personal guarantee of safety." Adrian's hand found Emily's squeezed gently. "She's no longer a factor in your calculations. She's always going to be a factor. She knows too much, represents too much uncertainty." Marcus turned his cold eyes on Emily. "I could make arrangements to ensure that uncertainty is permanently resolved." Emily felt fear spike through her chest, but forced her voice to remain steady. "You could try. But I've survived 3 years of your best efforts to find me. I'll survive whatever comes next." Brave words from someone sitting in the crosshairs. "Accurate words from someone who's already dead if you decide to kill her," Adrian interjected. "The information is distributed with contingencies. If anything happens to Emily, everything releases immediately with documentation pointing directly to you. Kill her, and you guarantee your destruction." Marcus studied them both, calculation shifting behind his cold eyes. Emily could almost see him running scenarios, weighing probabilities, trying to find an angle that gave him advantage. "This is an elegant trap," he said finally. "Well constructed. I'm impressed despite being the target." "It's not a trap. It's an exit strategy that allows you to leave the stage without being dragged off in handcuffs or body bags." "And if I refuse? If I decide to fight this war you're offering to prevent?" Adrian's expression went flat. No emotion, no warmth, just absolute certainty. "Then you lose everything. Your organization, your freedom, your life. I'm offering you survival with dignity. The alternative is annihilation without mercy. Choose wisely." The moment stretched eternal. 3 people on a bench overlooking beautiful water, deciding between peace and war while tourists photographed sea lions and children ate ice cream nearby. Then Marcus Varelli stood, straightened his jacket, and smiled with something that might have been respect. "You win this round, Mr. DeLuca. I'll accept your terms with appropriate modifications. We can negotiate through our respective attorneys. But understand this." He looked at Emily one last time. "If she ever becomes careless, if her new identity ever slips, I'll know. And I'll remember. There's no statute of limitations on betrayal in my world." "There's also no statute of limitations on protection in mine," Adrian replied, standing to face Marcus at equal height. "She's under my guarantee. Test it at your peril." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we understand each other. I'll expect detailed terms within 48 hours. Don't make me regret choosing survival over pride." He walked away through the crowd, disappearing among tourists like a shark submerging beneath peaceful waters. His security teams withdrew in coordinated precision, leaving Adrian and Emily alone on the bench overlooking the bay. Emily's breath came out in a shuddering rush. Did that actually just work? 90%. He agreed to terms, which was the primary objective. But he's also putting contingencies in place, planning his own exit strategy. We have approximately 48 hours before he either honors the agreement or attempts to eliminate all threats and run. So this isn't over. It's never over until someone is dead or completely neutered. We've achieved temporary peace. Now we ensure it becomes permanent. Adrian pulled out his phone, sent a series of rapid messages. Claire and Marcus are confirming federal agents observed the entire meeting. They're confused but not intervening. We have a window to leave the city before they decide to complicate matters. They walked back toward the parking structure, Emily's legs trembling with adrenaline crash. She'd just negotiated with a crime lord, stared into the eyes of a man who'd casually ordered deaths and maintained empires built on suffering, and she'd survived. You did well. Adrian said quietly as they reached the vehicle. Most people would have broken under that kind of pressure. You stayed composed. I was terrified. Terror doesn't negate courage. It amplifies it. Being brave when you're not scared is easy. Being brave when you're certain you might die, that's when character reveals itself. They drove toward the secondary airfield, leaving San Francisco behind in a blur of traffic and afternoon light. Emily watched the city recede in the side mirror, knowing she'd probably never return. This place had been her hiding spot, her cage, her grave that she'd somehow survived. Now she was leaving it behind for good. What happens next? She asked. We return to the estate. We coordinate the information release to maximize damage while minimizing blowback. We ensure Marcus honors his agreement, and we deal with Michael Chen. Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. Then you decide what comes after, new identity and fresh start, or something else entirely. What else is there? Adrian glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. That depends entirely on what you discover you want. You've been running for 3 years. Now you have the chance to stand still and choose a direction based on preference rather than fear. The plane was waiting when they arrived, engines already warming. Claire and Marcus materialized from the shadows, their expressions professionally neutral. Clean exit? Adrian asked. Federal agents are still at Pier 39 trying to understand what they witnessed, Claire reported. Marcus's people withdrew without incident. We're clear to depart. They boarded and Emily sank into leather seats that no longer felt quite as surreal. The jet lifted into afternoon sky, carrying them away from confrontation and toward whatever came next. Emily closed her eyes, exhausted beyond anything physical. The past 24 hours had demolished and rebuilt her entire understanding of herself and her situation. She'd stopped being invisible. She'd started being dangerous. And somewhere in that transformation, she'd become someone she barely recognized but was starting to respect. Adrian settled into the seat across from her, laptop already open, coordinating the machinery of Empire with the same efficiency he applied to everything. Rest, he said without looking up. Tomorrow, we finish this. Tonight, you're allowed to process what just happened. Emily wanted to argue, wanted to stay alert and engaged, but her body had other plans. She slept, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't dream about running. She dreamed about standing still while the world burned around her, flames that she'd lit herself, beautiful and terrible, and entirely under her control. Emily woke to darkness and the sound of rain against windows. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed too soft, the room too large, everything wrong in ways that suggested danger. Then memory returned. The estate. Adrian's protection. The war they'd started together. She checked her phone. 3 a.m. She'd slept for nearly 12 hours, her body demanding recovery from adrenaline and terror and the complete reorganization of her reality. A soft knock at her door made her freeze. "It's me," Adrian's voice came through the wood. "May I come in?" Emily pulled on a robe, silk, expensive, provided by Sophia, along with everything else in this gilded cage that was starting to feel less like imprisonment and more like partnership. "Come in." Adrian entered carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey that probably cost more than a car. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his usual perfect composure showing cracks. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Sleep is a luxury I can't afford right now." He poured whiskey into both glasses with hands that were almost steady. Almost. "Marcus is making moves, faster than expected, more aggressive than predicted. We have less than 24 hours before this situation becomes critical." Emily took the offered glass, the amber liquid catching lamplight like captured fire. "What kind of moves?" "He's liquidating assets, transferring money through channels we've been monitoring, calling in favors from people who owe him. Either he's preparing to honor our agreement and needs capital for his exit, or he's preparing for war and securing resources." Adrian sank into a chair by her window, staring out at rain-soaked gardens. "My analysts are split on which scenario is more probable." "What do you think?" "I think Marcus Varelli didn't build an empire by trusting anyone, especially not people who've just threatened his existence. He's planning something. The question is whether we can identify and counter it before he executes." Emily joined him at the window, watching water stream down glass in patterns that looked almost deliberate. "When do we release the flash drive information?" 6 a.m. Coordinated leaks to 5 different news organizations, 3 federal prosecutors, and 2 congressional oversight committees. By noon, Marcus's empire will be under siege from directions he can't simultaneously defend. Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing weather rather than orchestrating the destruction of a criminal organization. But that timeline assumes Marcus doesn't make a preemptive move. If he strikes first, we have to adapt. How would he strike first? We have the leverage. Leverage only matters if the person you're leveraging cares about survival more than revenge. Marcus has built his entire identity on being untouchable. Having that image shattered might matter more to him than living to see tomorrow. Adrian took a long drink. Men like him sometimes choose spectacular destruction over quiet defeat. Emily felt ice in her veins. You think he'd rather burn everything than accept our terms? I think it's a possibility we need to prepare for, which is why I'm here instead of sleeping. He turned to face her, and Emily saw genuine concern in his expression. Not the calculated performance he showed enemies, but something more human. Emily, if Marcus decides to go scorched earth, you'll be his primary target, not because you matter strategically, but because eliminating you would hurt me personally. Would it? Hurt you personally? The question hung between them, more intimate than anything physical could be. Adrian was silent for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. Yes, he said finally, you've become more than an asset in a strategic game. I respect you, trust you. Possibly even... He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. You matter, in ways that complicate my usual calculations. Emily's heart hammered. Adrian, don't make this more than what it is. We're partners in a dangerous game, and I've developed a vested interest in your survival beyond tactical considerations. That's all I can offer right now. Anything more would be a distraction neither of us can afford. But his eyes told a different story. They held something raw and unguarded, something that looked suspiciously like the beginning of feelings he'd probably trained himself never to acknowledge. Emily made a decision. She crossed to him, took the whiskey glass from his hand, and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Adrian froze, surprise breaking through his careful control. Then he responded with intensity that suggested he'd been restraining himself far longer than either of them had realized. His hands found her waist, pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and honest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he whispered. Probably the worst I've ever had, Emily agreed. It compromises judgment, creates vulnerabilities, gives Marcus ammunition if he discovers it. I know. We should stop, maintain professional distance, focus on survival. We should, Emily said. But are we going to? Adrian's laugh was quiet and defeated. No, apparently we're not. He kissed her again, softer this time, and Emily felt 3 years of isolation crack open. She'd been invisible for so long, untouched and untouchable, that the simple act of being held felt revolutionary. They moved to her bed without discussion, the physical intimacy a natural extension of the partnership they'd already built. Emily had expected Adrian to be controlled even in this, calculated, strategic, maintaining his careful composure. Instead, he was vulnerable, human. His hands trembled slightly as he traced her face. His breathing came uneven. He looked at her like she was something precious rather than useful, and that expression demolished the last of her defenses. What happened between them was intense and honest and terrifying in its implications, because it meant they both had something to lose beyond strategy and survival. It meant they'd created a weakness that enemies could exploit. It meant they cared. Afterward, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like expensive laundry and poor decisions, Emily stared at the ceiling and tried to process what they'd just done. Regrets? Adrian asked quietly. Probably. Tomorrow. Right now I'm too exhausted to feel anything except satisfied and terrified in equal measure. His laugh rumbled through his chest where her head rested. Accurate assessment of the situation. We've just handed Marcus a weapon if he's smart enough to use it. Then we don't let him be smart enough. We finish this before he realizes what we've given him. Adrian's arm tightened around her. You've changed so much in 3 days. The woman who arrived was afraid of her own shadow. The woman lying here is planning how to destroy enemies before they discover vulnerabilities. You changed me. Or maybe you just revealed who I always was underneath the performance. Both possibly. People are rarely just one thing. He kissed the top of her head, the gesture casual and intimate in ways that made Emily's chest ache. But Emily, whatever happens in the next 24 hours, whatever we have to do to survive this, remember that none of it negates this moment. Sometimes the best we can do is steal small pieces of humanity from the chaos. Emily wanted to argue that they could have more than moments. That maybe after the war they could explore whatever was developing between them without the shadow of violence hanging over everything. But she'd learned enough about Adrian's world to know that the war never really ended. It just paused long enough to catch breath before the next battle. So she held him and let the moment be enough. They dozed together as rain continued its percussion against windows and the world slowly lightened toward dawn. Emily's dreams were fragmented, roses that bled, flash drives that exploded, Michael Chen laughing while everything burned around him. She woke to Adrian already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It's 5:30, he said softly. "In 30 minutes we destroy Marcus Varelli's empire. Are you ready?" Emily sat up, let the sheets fall away, and met his eyes with certainty. She'd earned through 3 years of survival and 3 days of transformation. "I'm ready. Let's finish this." They dressed in silence, the intimacy of the night shifting into professional partnership as seamlessly as they'd shifted into physical connection. By the time they left Emily's room, no one observing them would guess anything had changed between them. But everything had changed, and they both knew it. The war room, Adrian's term for the secure office on the estate's second floor, hummed with controlled urgency. Claire and Marcus were already there, along with 3 other people Emily recognized from brief introductions the previous day. Adrian's inner circle, trusted with operations that couldn't be delegated to normal staff. "Status," Adrian said, settling into the chair at the head of the conference table. Claire pulled up multiple screens showing news websites, government portals, and what looked like law enforcement databases. "Leaks are scheduled to go live in 22 minutes. We've confirmed receipt by all targeted parties. Once they publish, there's no taking it back." "Marcus?" Adrian asked the logistics expert. "Continues liquidating assets. He moved another 40 million through offshore accounts overnight. Also made contact with known mercenaries, 3 separate groups, all elite. He's either planning to disappear completely or planning to fight." "Or both," Emily said. Everyone turned to look at her, and she felt the weight of their assessment. She was still the newest member of this team, still proving herself worthy of inclusion. He could be planning to strike at us, eliminate the threat we represent, then disappear with his liquid assets into a new identity. Adrian's expression shifted into approval. "Exactly what I was thinking. Marcus has the resources to wage a brief, brutal campaign against our operations while simultaneously executing his exit strategy. The question is which target he prioritizes." "You," Claire said bluntly. "He prioritizes you, Mr. DeLuca. You're the one who orchestrated his downfall. Emily is secondary." "Unless he's smart enough to recognize that eliminating Emily would hurt me strategically and personally," Adrian countered. "Marcus didn't build his empire by underestimating emotional vulnerabilities." Emily's stomach tightened. She was a liability now. The connection between them had transformed her from useful asset to exploitable weakness. "Then we ensure she's protected," Marcus said. "Secure location, multiple layers of security, complete isolation until the situation resolves." "No," Emily and Adrian said simultaneously. They looked at each other, and Emily saw her own determination reflected in his eyes. "Isolating her makes her vulnerable," Adrian said. "If she's with me, under my direct protection, Marcus has to go through me to reach her. That's a significantly higher difficulty threshold." "It also means if he comes for you, he gets both targets in one strike," Claire objected. "Only if he can strike successfully, which I don't intend to allow." Adrian checked his watch. 18 minutes until the leaks go live. "I want all of our defensive positions activated. Estate security at maximum. Intelligence assets monitoring Marcus's known locations and associates. If he sneezes, I want to know about it." The team dispersed to their respective stations, leaving Emily and Adrian alone in the war room, surrounded by screens showing a world about to tilt on its axis. "You should reconsider," Emily said quietly. Claire's right. Keeping me close creates risk you don't need. Need and want are different calculations. Adrian pulled her against him, the embrace brief but fierce. I'm not letting you out of my sight until Marcus is neutralized. Final decision. Because it's tactical or because it's personal? Both. I've learned to make my personal preferences align with strategic advantages. It's how I've survived this long without becoming a complete sociopath. Emily laughed despite the tension. Setting the bar pretty low there. In my world, not being a complete sociopath is actually an achievement. He released her as his phone buzzed. It's starting. First leak just went live at the Washington Post. They watched the screens as the carefully orchestrated destruction began. News alerts, breaking stories, headlines that would make powerful people very nervous very quickly. Financial records expose massive money laundering operation. Federal investigation reveals corruption at highest levels. Organized crime network tied to political donors. Each headline was a hammer blow. Each story another nail in Marcus Varelli's coffin. Adrian's phone exploded with calls and messages. He ignored them all, watching the cascade effect with grim satisfaction. Marcus will be getting the same alerts, he said, watching his empire crumble in real time. Now we see how he responds. They didn't have to wait long. At 6:47 a.m., the estate's security alarm screamed to life. Multiple vehicles approaching, Antonio's voice crackled through the intercom. Armed individuals, at least 20 contacts. They're not trying to hide. Adrian was already moving, pulling Emily with him toward the secure room at the estate's core. Lockdown protocol. Now. The estate transformed around them, steel shutters dropping over windows, reinforced doors sealing corridors, security teams mobilizing with military precision. Emily had known Adrian ran a sophisticated operation, but witnessing it activate for genuine threat was something else entirely. They reached the secure room, essentially a panic room disguised as a wine cellar, just as the first sounds of gunfire erupted from the estate's perimeter. Marcus chose war, Adrian said, securing the heavy door behind them. The room was equipped with monitors showing security feeds from around the property. He's hitting us with everything he has left. Emily watched the screens in horror as armed men breached the estate's outer defenses. Adrian's security team was responding with professional efficiency, but they were outnumbered and fighting on terrain the attackers had clearly studied. This is suicide for him, she said. Even if he wins, law enforcement will respond. He'll never escape. He doesn't plan to escape. He plans to eliminate us, then die on his terms rather than in federal custody. Adrian was coordinating defensive positions through encrypted communications, his tone calm despite the chaos. Marcus is choosing legendary destruction over quiet defeat. It's actually strategically sound from a certain perspective. What perspective is that? The one where he becomes a cautionary tale rather than a defeated criminal. Men in his position care deeply about how they're remembered. More gunfire. An explosion that shook the building's foundation. Someone screaming over the radio that the East Wing was compromised. Emily's hands shook as she watched security feeds showing Adrian's people fighting and dying to protect them. This was her fault. Her existence had created the vulnerability Marcus was exploiting. I should surrender, she said. End this. If I turn myself over, he'll kill you and then kill me anyway. Adrian pulled her away from the screens, forced her to look at him. This isn't about you anymore, Emily. This is about Marcus making a statement. You surrendering wouldn't change his objective. Then what do? We survive. We wait for law enforcement to respond to the gunfire and explosions. We let Marcus exhaust his resources attacking our defenses, and when the moment is right, we counterattack. Adrian's expression was hard, merciless. He wanted war. We're going to give him annihilation. The secure room had its own weapons cache. Adrian armed himself with efficient familiarity, then helped Emily check the pistol she'd carried to San Francisco. If they breach this room, he said, you shoot anyone who isn't me. Don't hesitate. Don't negotiate. Just pull the trigger. Understand? Emily nodded, her mouth too dry for words. They settled in to wait, watching the screens as battle raged through the estate. Adrian's security team was holding, but barely. Marcus's forces were well-trained and highly motivated, probably promised enormous payouts for success or guaranteed death for failure. There, Claire's voice came through Adrian's earpiece. Marcus himself, third vehicle. He came personally. Adrian's expression turned predatory. Where? North entrance. He's directing the assault from cover. If we can neutralize him, his forces will collapse. Can you get a clear shot? Negative. Too much cover. Would need to flank his position. Adrian was quiet for a moment, calculating. Then he looked at Emily with an expression she recognized. He was about to do something dangerous and didn't want to tell her because she'd try to stop him. No, she said. Whatever you're thinking, no. I can flank his position through the underground tunnels, emerge behind his location. One shot, this ends. You'll be completely exposed. His people will cut you down the moment you surface. Not if you create a distraction. Adrian pulled up a schematic of the estate on one of the monitors. The secure room has emergency access to the PA system. If you trigger the fire alarms, Marcus's people will hesitate, assume reinforcements or law enforcement. It'll give me the window I need. Emily grabbed his arm. This is insane. You're not sacrificing yourself to end this. I'm not sacrificing myself. I'm finishing what we started. He cupped her face with surprising gentleness. Emily, I've been in worse situations and survived. Trust me. I do trust you. That's why I know you're downplaying how dangerous this is. Adrian kissed her, quick and fierce and tasting like goodbye. If something goes wrong, Claire knows the extraction protocols. She'll get you out safely. The flash drive information is already distributed. Marcus's empire is finished regardless of what happens to us. You've won. Remember that. He was moving toward the tunnel access before Emily could formulate another argument. She wanted to scream, to physically restrain him, to do anything that would keep him from walking into what was clearly a suicide mission. But she'd learned enough about Adrian's world to know that sometimes survival required terrible risks. When? She called after him. 2 minutes. Watch the monitors. When you see me emerge from the tunnel exit, trigger the alarms. Give me 10 seconds of confusion. That's all I need. Then he was gone, disappeared into darkness that seemed to swallow him completely. Emily turned to the monitors, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack ribs. She found the feed showing the tunnel exit, a maintenance door hidden in the estate's north garden, barely visible among carefully maintained landscaping. She found the feed showing Marcus Varelli, crouched behind an expensive vehicle, directing his forces with hand signals and shouted commands. He looked calm, confident, certain of victory. She was going to help Adrian prove him wrong. The seconds dragged like hours. Emily counted them in heartbeats, in breaths that came too fast, in the cold weight of the pistol in her hand that she prayed she wouldn't need to use. Movement on the tunnel exit feed, the door opening fractionally. Adrian's form emerging into gray morning light, weapon raised, moving with lethal grace toward Marcus's position. Emily's hand slammed down on the fire alarm control. Instantly, sirens wailed throughout the estate. Sprinkler systems activated. Automated announcements demanded evacuation in calm, recorded tones that contradicted the violence happening around them. Marcus's forces hesitated exactly as Adrian had predicted. Confusion rippled through their formation. Were the alarms real? Was this a trap? Should they retreat or push forward? That 10-second window was all Adrian needed. Emily watched him close the distance to Marcus's position, watched him acquire target, watched his finger tighten on the trigger, and watched Marcus's bodyguard step into the line of fire. The shot took the bodyguard in the chest. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, but the sound alerted Marcus, who spun with weapon raised, and suddenly Adrian was in a firefight at point-blank range with no cover and no backup. Emily screamed, the sound swallowed by the secure room's soundproofing, as she watched Adrian take a hit. He staggered, returned fire, dove behind a marble fountain that exploded under sustained automatic fire. Claire! Emily shouted into the communication system. Adrian's pinned down. North Garden. He needs support now. En route. Claire's voice came back, tight with urgency. 30 seconds. 30 seconds was eternity when someone you cared about was bleeding in a garden while bullets turned marble into dust. Emily made a decision. Possibly the worst decision of her life, but she was committed before thought could interfere. She unlocked the secure room, grabbed the spare weapon from the cache, and ran. The estate was chaos, smoke and water from sprinklers, security teams coordinating defensive positions, Marcus's forces trying to maintain assault momentum despite confusion. Emily navigated through it like she was invisible again, using every lesson from 3 years of avoiding notice. She reached the north garden to find Adrian behind the fountain, bleeding from his shoulder, trading shots with Marcus and 2 remaining bodyguards. His face was gray with pain, but his aim was steady. Emily emerged from cover and fired. She'd never shot at a person before, never felt the specific horror of pulling a trigger knowing it might end a life. But her father had trained her well, and muscle memory took over where conscious thought faltered. One of the bodyguards dropped. The other turned toward her, weapon swinging around. Adrian shot him twice. Center mass. Professional execution. That left Marcus. The crime lord looked between Adrian and Emily, calculation shifting to something like respect, despite the situation. His own weapon was empty, ejected magazine on the ground. No time to reload. Impressive, Marcus said, hands raised in surrender. I underestimated you both. That's rare for me. It's also fatal, Adrian replied, weapon trained on Marcus's chest. You should have taken the exit I offered. I should have, but pride is expensive and I've always been willing to pay its price. Marcus smiled, that terrible, empty expression. So what now? You execute me here? Make me disappear? Turn me over to federal authorities? Sirens in the distance. Police responding to reports of explosions and gunfire. The cavalry arriving too late to help, but in time to complicate everything. Adrian's finger tightened on the trigger. Emily saw the calculation in his eyes. How easy it would be to end Marcus here, to eliminate the threat permanently, to ensure he could never retaliate. But she also saw him hesitate, saw something human break through the careful control. Emily, he said quietly, never taking his eyes off Marcus. What do you think we should do? The question shocked her. Adrian was asking her to decide another person's fate, giving her the choice between execution and mercy. Emily looked at Marcus Varelli, the man who'd hunted her for 3 years, who'd just attacked them with overwhelming force, who represented every cruel power structure that treated people like her as disposable. She thought about what killing him would cost them. Not legally, she was certain Adrian could make the legal problems disappear, but what it would cost in the parts of themselves that were still human. Let the authorities have him, she said finally. His empire is destroyed. The flash drive information ensures he'll spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Killing him now would be revenge, not justice. And we're better than that. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he lowered his weapon. You're right, he said. We're better than that. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. Mercy from wolves. I never thought I'd see it. Not mercy, Emily corrected. Strategy. You dead become a martyr. You in prison become a cautionary tale. We're choosing the narrative that serves our purposes. Claire and her team arrived just as police vehicles screeched to a halt outside the estate's perimeter. Marcus was disarmed, restrained, and secured with professional efficiency. His remaining forces surrendered or fled, and within minutes the battle was over. Emily found herself sitting on a marble bench in the destroyed garden, hands shaking with adrenaline crash, watching paramedics treat Adrian's shoulder wound while police swarmed through the estate. You shouldn't have left the secure room, Adrian said when the paramedics gave them space. You shouldn't have walked into an obvious ambush. Apparently we're both terrible at following good advice. He laughed, then winced as the movement pulled his stitches. Fair point. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for giving me the choice about Marcus. That meant something. You've earned the right to help shape how this ends. It's your story as much as mine now. Police were approaching, federal agents, people who would have questions that required carefully prepared answers. Emily saw Claire already coordinating with attorneys, saw the machinery of Adrian's empire shifting into crisis management mode. What happens now? Emily asked. Now we deal with the aftermath, give statements, navigate the legal implications of a small war happening on private property. Ensure Marcus faces justice without exposing information we'd prefer to keep private. Adrian took her hand, squeezed gently. And then we finish the last piece of business. Michael Chen. Michael Chen. He's going to answer for abandoning you, for 3 years of letting you carry consequences that should have been his. Emily nodded, feeling something cold and hard settle in her chest. Marcus had been about survival and strategy, but Michael was personal. Michael was the man who'd made her invisible by making her disposable, and he was about to discover that the invisible girl he'd abandoned had become someone very different, someone dangerous, someone done running and ready for reckoning. The rain had stopped, leaving the garden sparkling with water that caught morning light like diamonds scattered across devastation. Somewhere in that beauty was a metaphor for what they'd become. Violence and redemption tangled so tightly you couldn't separate them without destroying both. Emily stood, offered her hand to Adrian, and pulled him to his feet. "Let's go finish this," she said. And together, they walked toward whatever came next. The legal aftermath consumed 3 days of statements, interviews, and carefully orchestrated narratives that transformed a criminal assault into a defensive action by a legitimate businessman protecting his property. Adrian's attorneys were artists in their field, painting Marcus Varelli as an unstable crime lord whose final desperate act had been attacking an innocent estate owner and his staff. The flash drive information continued its cascade through news cycles and federal investigations. Politicians resigned, judges recused themselves from cases. Shell companies dissolved overnight. Marcus Varelli's empire didn't just fall, it evaporated, leaving nothing behind except indictments and cautionary tales. Emily watched it all from Adrian's estate, her shoulder pressed against his uninjured one as they sat in his study reviewing news coverage. The visible Emily Chen, the one reporters were trying to find, had disappeared again, this time into protective custody and sealed court documents. She existed in official records as a witness requiring federal protection, her real identity buried under layers of legal maneuvering that would take years to unravel. "It's done," Adrian said on the third evening, closing his laptop with finality. "Marcus will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. His organization is dismantled. The immediate threat is neutralized." "Which leaves Michael," Emily said quietly. Adrian's expression hardened. "Which leaves Michael. Claire's team has maintained surveillance on his Vancouver location. He's been watching the news coverage, trying to understand how his carefully hidden insurance policy became public. He doesn't know you're involved yet, thinks it was law enforcement or rival criminals who found his flash drives. When do we tell him the truth? Tomorrow. We fly to Vancouver. You confront him. He faces consequences for abandoning you." Adrian's hand found hers. "But, Emily, I need you to be certain about this. Revenge rarely provides the satisfaction we imagine. Sometimes the best victory is walking away and building something better from the ashes." Emily had spent 3 days thinking about this exact question. What did she actually want from Michael Chen? Death seemed excessive. She wasn't a killer, despite having fired a weapon in the garden. Prison felt appropriate, but also insufficient. What she really wanted was something more fundamental. She wanted him to see her, to recognize that the disposable assistant he'd abandoned had survived and thrived despite his betrayal, to understand that using people as insurance policies had consequences beyond his careful calculations. "I want him to know," she said finally. "I want him to look me in the eyes and understand that I'm not invisible anymore, that I matter, that he failed to break me." "Then that's what you'll get." Adrian stood, pulling her up with him. "But tomorrow. Tonight, we rest. The war is over, Emily. We survived. That's worth acknowledging." They walked through the estate's repaired corridors. Construction crews had worked around the clock to erase evidence of the battle, replacing shattered marble and bullet-scarred walls with seamless precision. Money could fix almost anything, Emily was learning, except the internal damage, the changes that happened to people when they crossed lines they could never uncross. She'd killed someone in that garden. The bodyguard who'd turned his weapon toward her. She'd pulled the trigger and ended a life, and that knowledge sat in her chest like a stone she'd carry forever. Adrian seemed to sense her thoughts. "The first one is always hardest. It gets easier, which is its own kind of tragedy." "Does it get easier?" "The act does, the aftermath doesn't. I still remember every person I've killed, their faces, the moments before, the way they fell." His voice was distant, haunted. "It's the price we pay for survival in a world that doesn't reward mercy. You learn to carry it or it crushes you." They reached Emily's suite. She still maintained her own space despite spending most nights in Adrian's bed. Some boundary neither was quite ready to dissolve. She turned to face him in the doorway. "I don't regret it," she said. "I do it again to save you. But I also don't want to become someone who finds it easy, who stops feeling the weight of it." "Then don't. Hold on to that weight. It's what separates people like us from people like Marcus." Adrian kissed her forehead. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we finish the last chapter of this story. But Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in darkness, watching shadows shift across the ceiling, thinking about Michael Chen and the 3 years he'd stolen from her. She'd been so angry at first, furious that he'd given her the flash drive and then disappeared, leaving her to carry consequences he should have faced. Now, with perspective earned through proximity to Adrian's world, she understood Michael's choice differently. He'd been terrified, probably rightfully so. He'd made survival calculations and decided that abandoning her was worth his safety, just like she'd made survival calculations that led her to invisibility and eventual partnership with a man who orchestrated empires. Maybe they weren't so different, she and Michael. Maybe they'd both just been trying to survive in a world that treated people as disposable resources. The thought should have brought forgiveness. Instead, it hardened her resolve. Because Michael had made his choices from a position of power, employer to employee, man to woman, someone with resources to someone without. He'd used her disposability as a shield while he built his comfortable exile, and that required acknowledgement, if not punishment. Emily rose before dawn, dressed in clothes that split the difference between professional and intimidating, black slacks, a charcoal blazer, the kind of outfit that suggested capability and danger in equal measure. She'd learned from watching Adrian that presentation was its own form of power. She found him already awake in his study, coordinating the day's logistics with Claire and Marcus via secure video call. The Vancouver property is still under surveillance, Claire was saying. Michael maintains minimal security. He thinks he's successfully disappeared, doesn't expect company. Good, Adrian replied. We want him comfortable, unprepared. The shock will make him more likely to cooperate. Define cooperate, Marcus said, his tone suggesting he'd prefer more permanent solutions. Answer questions. Acknowledge responsibility. Face consequences appropriate to his actions. Adrian glanced at Emily, who'd silently entered the room. The consequences are Emily's to determine. We're just ensuring he can't run before she makes that determination. They noticed her then, 3 sets of eyes assessing her appearance and finding approval in it. Ready? Adrian asked. Ready, Emily confirmed, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. The flight to Vancouver was quiet. Emily spent it reviewing everything she knew about Michael Chen, the man who'd employed her for 2 years, who'd seemed kind if distracted, who trusted her with his final insurance policy because she was invisible enough to hide it effectively. She tried to remember details. His favorite coffee order, the way he'd tapped his pen when nervous, his wife who'd left him a year before his disappearance, taking their daughter to Portland and never looking back. Had he been a good man caught in impossible circumstances, or had he always been someone who used people and rationalized it as necessity? Emily suspected the truth lived somewhere between those extremes, in the gray spaces where most human behavior existed. Vancouver emerged through clouds like a promise. Glass towers and green mountains, a city that had mastered the balance between urban ambition and natural beauty. Michael's new life was here, purchased with money skimmed from Marcus Varelli and sustained through careful invisibility. Not so different from Emily's own strategy. She'd hidden in plain sight as a maid. He'd hidden in plain sight as a retired consultant living modestly in a nice neighborhood. The car that met them at the airport was nondescript, driven by one of Claire's local assets. They drove through the city toward residential neighborhoods where houses suggested comfortable wealth without ostentation. Michael's home was a craftsman-style bungalow with a well-maintained garden and a car in the driveway that was nice but not memorable. Everything about it screamed, "Don't look at me," the same philosophy Emily had perfected. "He's inside," the driver reported, "alone, follows the same routine daily, coffee shop in the morning, grocery store in the afternoon, home by evening, creature of habit." Habits make people predictable, Adrian observed. Predictability makes them vulnerable. Stay here. Emily and I will handle this personally. They approached the house through the front door like ordinary visitors. Adrian knocked with polite authority, and Emily heard movement inside, footsteps approaching, a pause as Michael likely checked the peephole. The door opened. Michael Chen looked older than Emily remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, the kind of aging that came from sustained stress rather than simple time. He was wearing casual clothes, holding a coffee mug, looking like any other retiree enjoying a quiet morning. Then he saw Emily, and the color drained from his face like someone had opened a tap. "Hello, Michael," Emily said, her voice calm despite the chaos in her chest. "We need to talk." Michael tried to close the door. Adrian's foot prevented it, and suddenly they were inside, the door closing behind them, Michael backing away with hands raised in a placating gesture. "Emily, I can explain." 3 years, she interrupted. 3 years I thought you were dead. 3 years I carried your flash drive, thinking I was honoring a dead man's final request. 3 years you let me run and hide and live in fear while you built this comfortable new life. I didn't know how to contact you safely. Marcus had people everywhere. If I'd reached out, I'd have led them straight to you. Don't. Adrian's voice cut through Michael's excuses like a blade. Don't insult her intelligence by pretending concern. You used her as a storage device for information you didn't want attached to yourself. When the situation became dangerous, you faked your death and let her carry the consequences. Own it. Michael's gaze shifted between them, calculation working behind his fear. You're Adrian DeLuca. I've seen you in the news. The assault on your estate, Marcus Varelli's arrest. His eyes widened. The flash drives. You're the ones who released the information. We destroyed Marcus Varelli's empire, Emily confirmed, using the insurance policy you gave me, the one you probably assumed would never see daylight because I'd be too frightened to use it. I gave it to you because I trusted you. You gave it to me because I was disposable, because if Marcus found it, you could claim I'd stolen it without your knowledge, because employees are invisible and easy to blame. Emily stepped closer, watching Michael retreat until his back hit the wall. I spent 3 years being invisible because of you, because you made me a target and then disappeared. I'm sorry, truly. I was scared. I made terrible choices. If I could go back, you can't. None of us can. Emily pulled out her phone, showed him photographs of the battle at Adrian's estate, of Marcus in handcuffs, of headlines announcing the collapse of a criminal empire. But you can face consequences for those choices. That's why we're here. Michael's hands trembled. The coffee mug slipped, shattered on the floor, spreading liquid across hardwood in patterns that looked like blood. What do you want? Money? I have accounts, access to resources. Whatever you need, I don't want your money. Emily's voice was cold, certain. I want you to understand what you cost me. 3 years of my life, Michael. 3 years of being afraid, of being alone, of thinking I was honoring your memory while you were living comfortably in Canada. I'll make it right, however I can. Just tell me how. Emily looked at this man who'd defined so much of her recent history, this frightened, aging man who'd made survival calculations at her expense, and she felt her anger transforming into something more complex. Pity, disgust, a weary understanding that hurting him wouldn't heal anything. You're going to cooperate with federal investigators, she said finally. You're going to provide testimony about Marcus Varelli's operations, everything you witnessed, everything you documented. You're going to ensure that the empire you helped build by laundering his money stays destroyed. That's suicide. Marcus has people. Even in prison, he can order... Marcus is finished, Adrian interrupted. His organization is dismantled. His assets are frozen. His people are scattered or arrested. You testifying is just insurance to ensure pieces don't rebuild. And in exchange for your cooperation, you'll receive immunity for your own crimes and placement in witness protection. Michael blinked. Witness protection? But you thought we came here for revenge, Emily said. We came here for accountability. There's a difference. You're going to face what you did. You're going to help ensure Marcus's victims get justice. And you're going to live with the knowledge that the woman you treated as disposable became the person who decided your fate. Understanding dawned in Michael's eyes. You're giving me a chance. I'm giving you consequences wrapped in mercy. Whether that's a chance or a punishment depends on how you choose to see it. Emily turned toward the door, then paused. The flash drive you gave me? It helped destroy an empire and saved lives. So thank you for that, even if your motivations were selfish. And I hope whatever comes next teaches you that people aren't insurance policies. They're humans who deserve better than being made invisible for someone else's convenience. She walked out without looking back, Adrian following close behind. They returned to the car where the driver waited, and Emily didn't speak until they were blocks away from Michael's comfortable exile. That felt anticlimactic, she said finally. Revenge usually does. We build it up in our minds as this cathartic moment, but the reality is just sad. Watching someone diminish doesn't fix what they broke in us. Adrian took her hand. But you handled it perfectly. You gave him justice without sacrificing your humanity. I'm proud of you. Emily leaned against him, feeling exhausted and empty, and somehow lighter. What happens to him now? Claire's people will coordinate his cooperation with federal prosecutors. He'll provide testimony, enter witness protection, and spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, even though the threat is gone. Fear becomes habit, and habits are hard to break. Like invisibility. Like invisibility, Adrian kissed the top of her head. Speaking of which, you're not invisible anymore, Emily Chen. The question is who you want to be now that you're visible. It was the question she'd been avoiding for days. With Marcus neutralized and Michael addressed, she had no immediate threats to distract from fundamental choices about her future. Stay with Adrian in his world of calculated violence and strategic power. Leave for the clean identity and fresh start he'd promised. Or forge some third path she couldn't quite envision. I don't know, she admitted. A week ago I was a maid. Now I've fought in a war, killed a man, and confronted my former boss in his exile. I don't know who that person is or what she wants. Then take time to figure it out. The war is over. You've earned the right to peace and consideration. Adrian's phone buzzed with incoming messages, probably the machinery of his empire requiring attention, because power never truly rested. But Emily, whatever you decide, know that you have a place in my world if you want it, not as an asset or a liability, as a partner. Someone I trust and value beyond strategic considerations. Emily's chest tightened. Are you asking me to stay? I'm offering you the choice to stay. There's a difference. I won't trap you with obligations or guilt, but I also won't pretend I'd be unaffected by your leaving. His voice carried unusual vulnerability. You've become important to me in ways I didn't anticipate and probably should have prevented. I'd like to explore what that means if you're willing. And if I'm not? If I choose the fresh start instead? Then I ensure you get the best possible fresh start available. New identity, resources, my guarantee that no one from this world ever touches you again. He met her eyes. I meant what I said about not keeping people who don't want to stay. You'll have your choice, Emily. I promise. The car drove them back to the airport, and Emily spent the flight considering futures that branched in directions she'd never imagined a week ago. She could disappear again, properly this time, with resources and protection. Start over somewhere warm and quiet. Maybe open a bookstore or teach English to international students. Live a normal life where violence was something that happened in movies rather than in gardens. Or she could stay in Adrian's world, learn the machinery of power, transform from invisible victim to visible player. See what partnership with someone like him could become when survival was no longer the primary motivation. Both futures had merit. Both carried risks. The deciding factor, Emily realized, wasn't which future was safer or smarter. It was which future felt true to who she'd become in the process of stopping being who she'd been. The girl who'd hidden for 3 years would have chosen safety, would have run toward invisibility and hoped it held this time. But Emily wasn't that girl anymore. They landed at Adrian's private airfield as evening painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The estate waited in the distance, its damaged sections repaired, its gardens reclaimed from battle. Home, Emily thought, then caught herself on the word. When had this place become home? When had she stopped seeing it as a cage and started seeing it as a base of operations? I need to tell you something, she said as they drove through the estate's gates. Adrian tensed fractionally. I'm listening. 3 years ago, I ran because I was scared. I made myself invisible because I thought if no one saw me, no one could hurt me. And for a while it worked. I survived. But survival isn't the same as living. Emily turned to face him fully. This week, you've given me the chance to live, to fight, to matter, to be seen for who I actually am rather than what I was performing. And I don't want to give that up. I don't want to run again. Are you saying? I'm saying I want to stay. I want to see what partnership with you looks like when we're not actively being shot at. I want to learn your world and figure out what role I can play in it. That's mine rather than someone else's definition. She took his hand. I'm saying yes to the offer you didn't quite make, but we're clearly building toward. Adrian's smile was genuine, relieved, possibly even joyful. You're certain? This world is dangerous even when we're not at war. There will be threats, complications, moral compromises that challenge everything you thought you believed. I shot someone to save you. I think I've already crossed the moral compromise threshold. Emily laughed, surprising herself. Adrian, I'm not naive about what this means, but I'm also not willing to go back to being invisible just because visibility is scary. You've taught me that fear is just information, not instruction. I can be afraid and still choose to stay. Then stay. He pulled her close, careful of his healing shoulder. Stay and we'll figure this out together. No more invisibility, no more running, just partnership in whatever comes next. They sealed the decision with a kiss that felt like promise and beginning rather than ending. The car pulled up to the estate's entrance where staff waited to attend to arriving employers. But Emily and Adrian sat in the vehicle for a moment longer, holding each other in the space between what had been and what would be. What happens now? Emily asked. Now we rebuild. The estate. My organization. Your identity as someone who exists openly in this world. Adrian's tone shifted into planning mode. Claire will handle the legal framework. We'll create a cover story that explains your sudden presence in my life. Perhaps a distant relative or a consultant I hired, something that gives you legitimacy without attracting investigation. So I'm still performing a role, just a different one. We're all performing roles. The difference is you get to choose which one and how you play it. He opened the car door, offered his hand. Come on, let's go home. Home. There was that word again, settling into Emily's vocabulary with surprising comfort. They walked into the estate together, past staff who'd learned not to ask questions, through hallways that had witnessed violence and survival in equal measure. Adrian led her to his study where Claire and Marcus were already waiting with the kind of patience that suggested they'd anticipated this arrival. Status? Adrian asked, settling into his chair with the ease of someone reclaiming familiar territory. Claire pulled up reports on multiple screens. Michael Chen is cooperating with federal prosecutors. His testimony is corroborating evidence from the flash drives. The case against Marcus Varelli's organization is airtight, probably redundantly so, but prosecutors are building it carefully. Marcus himself? Emily asked. Arraigned on 47 counts, ranging from money laundering to conspiracy to commit murder. No bail. He'll spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Marcus, the logistics expert, allowed himself a slight smile. His remaining assets are being seized, his people are scattered, the empire is truly dismantled. And threats against this estate or its occupants? Minimal and declining. Word has spread about what happened here. People understand that attacking Adrian DeLuca's territory is suicide. Claire's gaze shifted to Emily. They also understand that you're under his protection. Your new identity is being constructed as we speak. Within a week, you'll exist officially as someone with history and legitimacy that can withstand investigation. Emily felt the machinery of power working on her behalf, transforming her from invisible victim to visible player through documentation and strategic narrative. It should have felt manipulative. Instead, it felt like being built rather than erased. What do I need to do? She asked. Learn, Adrian said simply. Learn how this world works. Learn the skills you'll need to navigate it safely. Learn where your interests and talents can best contribute to our operations. He gestured to the screens showing organizational charts and business operations. I'm not asking you to become me. I'm asking you to become the version of yourself that thrives in partnership with me. That's going to look different than anything either of us can predict right now. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Emily had spent 3 years trying to disappear. Now she was being invited to emerge as someone new, someone powerful, someone who mattered. When do we start? She asked. We already have, Claire said, pulling up a schedule on one of the screens. I've arranged training sessions covering everything from advanced security awareness to financial operations to strategic planning. You'll also work with communication specialists to develop your public persona, how you present yourself, how you interact with various constituencies, how you protect your privacy while maintaining necessary visibility. Emily scanned the schedule, saw months of intensive development ahead, and felt something like excitement rather than dread. She was going to learn, grow, transform into someone capable rather than just surviving. There's one more thing, Adrian said, his tone shifting to something more serious. Emily, staying in this world means accepting that violence is sometimes necessary, that people will try to hurt you, use you, eliminate you if they perceive you as a threat. Are you prepared for that reality? Not as an abstract concept, but as a practical certainty? Emily thought about the bodyguard in the garden, about the weight of the pistol in her hand, about the moment she had chosen Adrian's life over her innocence. I'm prepared, she said. I don't like it. I'll probably never be comfortable with it, but I'm prepared to do what's necessary to survive and protect the people I care about. Good. Because caring about people in this world means becoming their weakness or their strength. I'd prefer you be strength. Adrian stood, moved to the window overlooking gardens that had been rebuilt after battle. This estate was my father's. He built it as a fortress because he understood that power requires protection. But he also made it beautiful because he believed that strength without beauty was just brutality. He turned back to face her, and Emily saw something vulnerable in his expression. I want to build something here that's both strong and beautiful. An operation that has integrity alongside effectiveness. A life that has meaning beyond survival. And I think you could be central to creating that if you're willing. Emily crossed to him, took his hands, and felt the potential of the moment. They were standing in a study where empires had been planned and wars had been won, where her own transformation from invisible to essential had been orchestrated, and they were deciding together what came next. I'm willing, she said. Show me how to build something worth protecting. Adrian kissed her then, soft and deep and tasting like promise. When they broke apart, Claire and Marcus had discreetly withdrawn, giving them privacy for the moment. It's not going to be easy, Adrian warned. This life, this partnership, there will be days you question every choice that brought you here. Probably, but there will also be days I'm grateful for every choice, including the roses you sent to make me visible. Emily smiled. I spent 3 years invisible. I'm ready to spend the next 3 years learning what it means to be seen. 3 years? I was hoping for longer than that. Let's start with 3 and reassess. I'm new to long-term planning that doesn't involve hiding and hoping. They spent the evening reviewing Emily's training schedule, discussing role definitions, planning how to integrate her into Adrian's operations in ways that played to her strengths. She'd spent 3 years observing power structures from invisible positions. Now she'd learned to navigate them from the center. As night fell and the estate settled into quiet, Emily found herself back in her suite, the room that had been her gilded cage and was now just another space she occupied by choice rather than necessity. The roses from that first morning were long dead, discarded days ago. But the card remained, tucked into her nightstand drawer. She retrieved it, read the words that had started everything. For the girl this house pretends not to see. Emily smiled, took a pen, and added her own words beneath Adrian's original message. She sees herself now. That's what matters. She placed the card back in the drawer and moved to the window, looking out over gardens rebuilt after battle, over grounds that held both violence and beauty in equal measure. Somewhere in the city beyond, Michael Chen was preparing to testify against an empire he'd helped build. Marcus Varelli was sitting in a cell, watching his legacy collapse through news reports. Federal agents were building cases that would reshape criminal power structures across the West Coast. And Emily Chen, no longer invisible, no longer running, no longer defined by other people's choices, was standing in a mansion beside a man who'd seen her when no one else had, and deciding what kind of person she wanted to become. It wasn't a happy ending exactly. Too much violence lived in the foundation. Too many compromises had been made, too many lines had been crossed. But it was an honest ending, a real one. The kind where survival transformed into agency and fear transformed into power and invisibility transformed into choice. Emily had been the girl no one saw, the girl this house pretended not to notice, the girl who'd mastered the art of disappearing. Now she was just Emily, visible, powerful, present. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. She turned from the window as Adrian knocked softly at her door. "Come in," she called. He entered carrying 2 glasses of wine, offering her one with a slight smile. "I thought we should toast to new beginnings." Emily took the glass, raised it toward his. "To new beginnings, and to partnerships that survive roses and revelations. To Emily Chen, Adrian added, the woman who stopped being invisible and started being essential. They drank, and Emily tasted possibility on her tongue, complex and uncertain, and entirely her own to define. The war was over. The threats were neutralized. The future waited like an open road stretching toward horizons she couldn't quite see but was ready to explore. She'd spent 3 years in the shadows. Now she was stepping into light, and she was ready for whatever that light revealed. Together, Emily and Adrian stood at the window overlooking gardens that had witnessed battle and survived, watching moonlight paint the world in shades of silver promise. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Some moments existed beyond words, in the space where two people who'd chosen each other despite impossible circumstances simply existed together. Emily had been looking for safety when she'd taken the job at this estate 3 years ago. What she'd found instead was transformation, power, partnership. A version of herself she'd never known existed beneath the performance of invisibility. The roses had been a beginning. This moment was a continuation, and tomorrow would bring new challenges and choices and opportunities to prove that she was more than just the girl who'd survived. She was the girl who'd thrived, the girl who'd fought back, the girl who'd won. And in Adrian's arms, watching gardens bloom in moonlight, Emily Chen finally understood what it meant to be seen. Not as a victim, not as a pawn, not as someone invisible or disposable or easily forgotten, but as herself, fully, completely, without apology or qualification. And that visibility, earned through fire and fear and the courage to stop running, was the sweetest victory of all. The end.